Probably drinking soup. Yeah, you walked a lot too. Let's see. We about ready? Let's see. We're missing Kathy and Harry. Let's bring.
I wonder if she's gonna make me read both of these.
Kathy, do we have to read both treasurer's
Read
reports
both
so
of
we can
them?
have a meeting? Okay.
Uh-oh, started getting directions already.
What? Oh, no. That was my wife.
Yeah, that's why I said, are you getting
Oh,
directions?
yeah.
Yeah, they got them labeled wrong, yeah. Just that one.
I gotta get my, I have to wear glasses
Yeah.
now when I read.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order. We do, just for everybody's knowledge, we do have a quick beer board meeting that'll be right before our regular town meeting. So we're going to go into the beer board meeting first. So this is the beer board for Monday, August 5th, 2019. Everyone is here and accounted for. Do we have any old business, Mrs. Durant? All right. Oh, I forgot to approve the minutes. So I'll approve the minutes from the April 1st, 2019 meeting.
Motion to approve?
Motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objection to those minutes? Seeing none, that item passes. On to, on to new business, item A, application for on-premise beer permit for the Legacy Bar and Grill located at 11695 Highway 70 in Arlington, Tennessee, due to change in ownership. Mr. Lawson.
This is a application, like I said, for changing ownership of Legacy. Brian Hartman, still within the family, but changing ownership, increasing bond. The applicant is here. They've made the application, background check's been completed, staff recommends approval. If you have any questions, you can address them, the applicant's here if you have any questions.
You've heard the recommendation by Mr. Lawson. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion by Mr. Harmon.
Second.
Second by Mr. Brooks. Discussion, questions?
Family in it.
His family. Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Wait, hang on. We have a public hearing on that, correct? We do. I'm sorry. So, I need a motion to close the meeting and open a public hearing. Motion by Mr. Brooks, second by Mr. McKee. We are now on a public hearing for an off-premise beer permit for on-premise beer permit, excuse me, I was reading the minutes, for Legacy Bar and Grill. This was published, so if anyone is here to speak on this particular topic, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. And this would be only for the Legacy Bar and Grill. Seeing none, I have a motion to close the public hearing and resume the meeting. You have a motion. All right. Back to any more discussion. Any discussion on the original item? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes. Any other new business, Mr. Durant? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion and a second. We're adjourned, but we're only adjourned from the beer board meeting, so nobody get excited. We're going straight into the the Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting for Monday, August 5th, 2019. Please note that everyone is here. If everyone will please stand for the opening prayer by Alderman Jeff McKee, and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight, and Lord, it's a hurting country, and our hearts go out to you, and we just ask for your sovereignty and your righteousness, your grace, Lord, with our country, with these shootings this weekend, Lord. I just pray for those families and those cities and towns dealing with that. I just can't imagine, Lord. I pray for our town that we never have to endure something like that. Lord, please protect the town of Arlington, the city of Memphis, and the metro area. Lord, I lift up each one of these members up here. I pray for them. I ask for the covering of your grace. Lord, I just ask you that you give us wisdom in this meeting, that we do the best we can for this town. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Little Mr. William Hinkle, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Please place your hand over your hearts. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the June 3rd, 2019 meeting and the special called meeting on June 27th, 2019? Motion by Mrs. Pardue. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Biggs. Any discussion or questions on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? That item passes. Next, we have grievances and comments from citizens. This is a chance we allow anyone to come forward and speak on any particular topic. We'll give you up to 3 minutes. Just we ask you state your name and address for the record. Please no personal attacks, and please note that if you have questions, if they're not answered tonight, staff will try to get back with you at another time. So is there anyone here to speak on any particular topic? Oh, I'm sorry, I was looking at people coming. Mrs. Wiseman, come forward. Thank you.
Deborah Wiseman, 5411 Arline Drive, Arlington. Let me just preface this by saying I love theater, I love outdoor events, and I love outdoor venues. Of all the people in the town, I probably work more on outdoor events. I do Arlington April, Christmas on the Square. I'm part of the board of Arlington Community Theater in the past as well as now. So the amphitheater is what I'd like to talk about. So I just wanted you to know it's not that I'm against the amphitheater. I just think you really have to have a really good plan. And I've talked to this with you, Mayor, as well as Mr. Rant. You just have to have a plan to use that venue. Outdoor venues are hard to book. They're hard to execute. I know I've heard it, well, the high school will probably use it. I'm like, well, during the summer, they're not even in school, so how are they going to use it? The theater will probably use it. We'd love to use it. So you're talking a couple of times a year, we'd probably use it. Your outdoor events, you can have April to October at the most. I know it's planned for the Music on the Square, which is a great idea too, but again, that's 7 times a year. So you've got this nice big structure that could potentially be empty most of the time. And it's not as bad when it's College Hill Park and it's just an amphitheater, which I was part of having that built, and we utilized it a lot. When we brought the theater back to Arlington, we had to almost repair the whole thing because it was just not used. I mean, if you think about how often is the amphitheater College Hill Park used, very minimum, very minimum. So I just am encouraging you before you step into this venue, this particular venue, look at what it takes to run it. I mean, you're going to have somebody run it. Trust me, I know Arlington and April, just getting vendors out there takes a lot of my time. And it's very time-consuming for any individual, and I'm a volunteer. So do you have town staff that's going to do nothing but schedule events? Lovett Shell is a great thing, but it has paid staff. Every theater in Memphis pretty much has a staff that brings this and books this. Same thing with the farmers market. It's a nice area, great, but to fill that up and make sure we utilize it, you're going to have somebody to be over that, whether it's a volunteer group, whether it's a paid staff. So just before you jump out there and build something, it's not a let's build it and they will come. You've got to make sure they're coming before you spend that much money of the citizens' money to build it. Not bad ideas. I'm not saying it's all negative. I'm just like, be methodical in how you're going to utilize those structures because they are key. That's all.
Thank you very much. Is anyone else here to speak on any particular topic? Yes, sir. I don't know if I have Ms. Wiseman state her name and address for the record. I did? Okay, all right, good. Just want to make sure.
I'm Larry Malone. I live at 12500 Bonsai Bend. 2 things I wanted to bring up. One, I was driving down the road recently off of Milton Wilson coming back towards Vinegar Gems where you're building the new park. I'm a new resident, moved here a little over a year and a half ago, and there were kids riding their bikes in the middle of the road. They have no other choice to get to that new park but just drive right down the middle of the road. I mean, something needs to be done to protect these kids. There's no sidewalk. I mean, there's a ditch on both sides. I mean, that's a liability and a responsibility we have as a community.
And if you look at all the development that's going on up and down Milton Wilson, all those kids, they're gonna wanna come enjoy that park. Are you gonna put them at risk? So somebody needs to look into that, and I'd like to get some feedback on what can be done to that. And then the other issue I wanted to bring to your attention is when you're coming, and I'm new to the city, okay? But when you're coming from Airline Road and coming up Milton Wilson, when you get to the crest of that hill, it is ridiculous how bad the road is there. They've tried to fix it twice, and this last time they came out, I mean, it's where they patched, but on the left-hand lane, I mean, everybody tries to stop and go around the concave hole that's in the road. I mean, we need to fix it. Somebody needs to dig it out, fix it right, so it's not so rough. I mean, it tears up your cars, and cars are swerving to miss it. So, anyway, that's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Malone. Is it
You don't usually answer that, but I like that.
we don't,
first
but we can answer both of them. One, do you want to answer
I had a
first?
question for him. You were saying, I just want to make sure, you're talking about Chester going to the playground.
No,
No.
You're talking about the
one
soccer
that's going out
complex?
towards the interstate. I don't know, it goes by Vinegar Gyms to the
soccer
park.
complex.
Forest. The new soccer
Forest,
complex
okay.
and all that behind Vinegar Gyms.
That's where you're
Yeah.
talking about the sidewalks?
Yeah, from Milton Wilson to come to the park, there's
Down
no
Forest Street.
sidewalk. I mean, there's a short distance where that subdivision is, but beyond that,
That's an easy answer.
everybody's forced to be in the middle of the road.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was,
Yeah, we're
because you said Milton Wilson, I was trying to get in my head where we were going. That's
Answer
all.
that.
You
All
take a
right.
left
can answer.
turn if you're
Go ahead.
going north on Milton
Mr.
Wilson.
McKee's going to answer that
I
question.
can
Yes.
answer that one for you. Unfortunately, I live on Forest Street, and I live the last house before you get to Maple Grove. There's going to be a subdivision behind me. They're already starting it, okay? So when you're coming down from Milton Wilson in front of Maple Grove, then the sidewalk stops.
Correct.
It's going to bend and go back behind the subdivision all the way to the soccer complex, the whole forest. It's going to be a walking trail and everything all the way back there.
There'll
Okay,
be connectivity from Depot Square to basically Milton Wilson.
And it'll also be connected in the very back, coming from Maple Grove. There'll be a road back there also. There'll be connectivity there. So there'll be two different ways to get there, from the Forest Street and from Maple Grove.
So, Mr. Malone, just so you know, every time there's a lot of, Old Town, no sidewalks in some areas, ditches and stuff, but every time something new is built, it's all taken into consideration connectivity. I mean, that's part of our long-term transportation plan. It's part of every development that we do. We try to make either walking trails or connectivity to the neighboring subdivision. So it's in the works. It's just not all happening right now. So I understand your concerns.
I appreciate that. I just hate to
Okay.
see those 8, 10-year-old kids on bicycles tooling down the middle of the road.
Yes, sir.
Because some people don't pay attention.
Yes,
I
sir.
do
Probably
too,
have-
because they
that
gotta
probably
back
doesn't
out.
happen out here, but in Memphis it does.
And just since we don't have anybody else speaking, I don't think, can we, I don't know if Mr. Perkins or Mr. Ant, real quick on the Milton Wilson area.
For the construction, I believe.
We have some areas there that we've already got marked to take care of, but we know we've got some other to do.
And just so you know, there's, with the development of that subdivision, the construction, correct me if I'm wrong, the construction, there will be when more is done, which is going to be a while, they'll have to come back in and address the issues, right?
On Milton Wilson or in their subdivision?
On Milton Wilson, correct? Not,
It looks like the top coat has already been put down.
we've had that, but I just know,
Yeah, we've got several sections that are not in great shape that we've got to work on. Some of the construction traffic, so we're trying to get to it.
You just don't want to drive down Milton Wilson with a cup of coffee.
I understand, I drive down there some too, so I think we all do at some point. Thank you. All right, I didn't see anybody else, but is there anybody else at the last minute that wants to speak? All right, so we'll move on to communications from the mayor. I don't see the sheriff's department here, so do we have a copy of that? We have a report on file, so sorry we don't have a sheriff's department officer here. So we'll move on to Chief Harville.
Good evening. This will be your monthly activity report for July 2019. We had a total of 81 responses. 44 of those were EMS. 37 of those were fire responses. We were given mutual aid 19 times. Correction, we gave mutual aid 19 times. We received it 11. Calls south of Interstate 40 were 14. Calls on Interstate 40 were 9. We were on 2 calls when Shelby County responded into the town of Arlington. We had 1 call on limited manpower. Total of 19 inspections. We checked 2 smoke alarms and installed 2 smoke alarms. We're almost through flushing our annual hydrants for the town of Arlington. We should be through at the end of this month. We also completed all of our in-service training for 2019. Our last was a medical class. We did it right here in the boardroom. And we had 1 residential fire, a little small 1-story residential at the end of Lamb Road. A-Ship made that call. That completes my report.
Any questions for Chief Harville?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's see. I'm going to do a recognition first, and then we'll have a few comments, and we'll get into the meeting. But I'll step down here to make it. So every now and then, we have students in our community or scouts and stuff that do extraordinary things, and we'd like to try to recognize them. We have Mr. William Hinkle here, who's here with Dad Don Hinkle. Mr. William Hinkle, if you'll come up. He, for one, and I'd like to offer his condolences about his grandfather. His grandfather is Gene Henders, who's been a long-time member of this community, so I know you've got a lot going on, and quite an accomplishment that we're about to read off here for you. So he earned his Eagle Scout. So that's if you've never been to Cub Scouts, that's big. So besides earning over 21 merit badges, including 3 citizenship badges, he completed a project for the Arlington chapter of the Association of Preservation of the Tennessee Antiquities, in which he identified and labeled every item in the historic blacksmith shop. He also worked with the APTA to organize the existing artifacts. Additionally, he created a catalog of all artifacts identifying each object and its purpose. So, if you're not familiar with, and you may go to find out, I'm going to put on the spot if I ask you, but to become Eagle Scout, it is a lot of work, it's a lot of projects. I've written several letters here lately for a couple other members of the community. You have something you want to say, Dave?
Age 15.
Age 15. So, is there anything you would like to add? I think we just want to take a moment to recognize you for your accomplishments.
I want to thank Deborah, first of all, for making the process so smooth. I had to earn about 80 hours of service hours, both men and adults. And I also had to do a fundraiser, which is also part of the Eagle Project, which I had to put together on my own. Throughout this, I couldn't ask for my dad for help, even though he wouldn't have been much use. I didn't expect this. So thank you.
Well, we appreciate what you do for the community. Thank you. And again, our condolences from this whole board to your entire family. Mr. Gene was a dear friend to many of us. Okay, on to just a couple of announcements. Since we didn't have a meeting last month, we've had quite a bit happen over the last month and a half. I mean, I was sitting there thinking today that the fireworks show was a big event, and we haven't met since then. And I want to say hats off. I think that was the best fireworks show that we've had. And I think everybody I talked to said the same thing. I don't know if it was the music was better, the fireworks were more, but it was a great show. So temperature was great. We got lucky and avoided the rain, but it was a great night, and it was a great community event. So thank you all to put it on. Harry, would you like to say anything on that?
No, it was good. Daniel did a great job for his first one. We came back and helped just a little bit. Brian Thompson and I did, just so he and Darlin could get it going. I thought, we had good food and good.
It was good.
Family event. Yes, it costs money, but I think we recover that money more than one time every year.
Good. Well,
And from somebody who lives on that side of town, they did a good job with the traffic this year, much better than the last couple.
well, good. It is a challenge over there.
It is. They did
So.
good.
Well, good. Well, thank you. Thank you to all staff, everybody put that on. It was a great event. Since then, we've also had the opening of the rebuild and opening of Playground of Dreams again, which I've heard nothing but rave reviews from people from all over. So I think that we're very fortunate there. We've had the opening of Forest Park, the soccer complex part, which is a beautiful facility. So it's amazing how much time has separated and what's happened over the last 6 weeks that you wouldn't think about. Just so everybody knows, school registration is tomorrow. That's going to be a crazy day for Miss Mason and her staff. Everybody and their cousin and their brother and sister is going to be trying to make last-minute phone calls to get something accomplished. So we appreciate all your principals and teachers and everybody. Let's see. The election, of course, is next month, September 19th. Early voting starts August 30th. Mrs. Durant, is the early voting at the safe room? And I don't have the times on that. Does anybody know the times of that? Or I haven't even.
The
First week is in the morning.
Yeah, the first week
Okay.
of early voting is 11 to 2, and the second week of early voting is 4 to 7.
Okay.
Except
So
for
we'll-
Saturday or
Except for Saturday, which is 11 to
4? 2,
Okay.
something, I don't know.
We probably need to post that as soon as possible on the town page.
today.
Okay, great. And just so everybody makes it in their calendar for next month, Monday is Labor Day, so it's going to be, September 3rd is the meeting? Tuesday, September 3rd. And I don't want to forget Mrs. Howell. She usually has an announcement or two, so if you'll let us know what's going on, and we'll move on.
The chamber luncheon is next Wednesday, the 14th, and David Kustoff, our congressman, is our speaker, and I anticipate a really big event. So please register if you plan to come so I can feed you. If you don't register, you may have to watch. And I would appreciate your help with that. And then the Arlington 5K is coming up really fast. It's on Saturday, September 7th. I'll put flyers for you all up there. And the proceeds from the 5K go to Arlington Community Schools through the Arlington Education Foundation. So if you can support that, we would really love you to help us out there and race that day. Or come out and cheer.
Yes, you'll take walkers or cheers or anything. They don't have to be runners, right? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Mrs. Howell. Any other announcements from anybody up here? Okay. On to, let's see, hang on. I do want to make an announcement on our agenda here in a second. We do need to move item A under new business, resolution 2019-43, about the paving issue. Their plane was late, so they're getting moved to the latter part of the agenda. We'll move them back to the end. So committee reports. Any committees have anything to report on? Treasurer's report. Did you have something? No. Oh, I think it was.
Okay, for the month of August, in our general fund, we had a beginning balance of $1,566,220.16, an ending balance of $1,294,125.62. In our sewer fund, beginning balance, $1,760,133.08, and an ending balance of $1,890,836.21.
Any questions on the treasurer's report? Okay, on to old business. Oh, we have a consent agenda first. So I'm going to read off just the item resolutions and mention briefly what each one is real fast and do the consent agenda. Is that, did you have a question? Okay. That's okay. I'll just kind of talk about I won't even read them off real fast. But the consent agenda has items including, most of these are facility use agreements, but there's some other issues. So this will be a facility use agreement with Arlington Arsenal Baseball, Arlington Youth Sports Football, Arlington Athletics Tennis. This will also be Youth Baseball and Softball, Soccer Association, Lacrosse. It also has an agreement with Cooperative Purchasing Program for the contracting of goods and services. Declare surplus equipment. Let's see, we also have development agreement for the southwest corner of Airline and Milton Wilson. Construction, the development agreement with the Villages of White Oak, which is is a constant we're always working on with them. Development agreement with the Villages of White Oak, first edition again, and land disturbance permit for Villages of White Oak again. So most of that's a lot of land disturbance and construction agreements that we usually do. If anybody has anything they'd like to pull off that consent agenda on the board, we can pull it off now. If not, we'll vote on the consent agenda. That work? Okay. So for the consent agenda, items A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. All in favor of them? I need a motion and a second.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Brooks.
Second.
Second. That's
We only got a couple of letters on it.
I know. Second. So who was the second?
everything
Mr.
in
Biggs.
between.
Yeah. It's a lot of information on that consent agenda, but it saves us a lot of time tonight.
Maybe we could save a little paper if we didn't print off the whole consent agenda.
I won't
Yes.
mind.
We have a first and a second by Mr. Biggs.
Read the whole book.
I bet.
Yes. Yes.
Somebody wouldn't want it.
All right, so we have a first and a second. We have a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes. On to old business. Do we have any old business, Mrs. Durant? On to new bit. Well, this is item A. This is item A. We did roll to the end, so everybody go to item B. Item B is Resolution 2019-44 to approve an amendment to the Master Development Plan for the Village at Donaldson Farms PD, a residential plan development on 13.23 acres south of Donaldson Farms Parkway across from Donaldson Elementary. Mrs. Reeder.
There we go. All right. Thank you. As you read off, this is an amendment to an approved master development plan. It's the Village at Donaldson Farms PD. Just to orient you a little bit, this project is on just over 13 acres. It was originally approved by the board back in October of 2017. At that time, it included just over 12 acres and 27 homes, as well as the associated improvements for the subdivision. Since that time, the applicant was able to purchase some additional land and is requesting this amendment to incorporate that as well as revise the layout somewhat due to things that they found after approval. They presented this to the Planning Commission in May and again later in July with some revisions that were asked for from the planning commissioners at that first meeting. They're now requesting consideration of this new layout. As I mentioned, it's on Donaldson Farms Parkway. It sits on the south side just across from Donaldson Elementary School here. So the uses in the proposal have not changed. It's still single-family homes and open space. You will find there's 3 additional lots for a total of 30 now within the subdivision. This increases the density slightly from 2.21 to 2.27 dwelling units an acre, considering the additional land that was added. Our zoning designation, which is RS18, allows up to 2.42, so this is well within what we allow. Along with residential, the open space on the site includes 3.1 acres of open space, or 23.5%. This also exceeds our requirement. And just to orient you somewhat, this is the elementary school across the street, so this is the main driveway into their little circular drive here. So the property starts directly across from that and extends to the west. There's currently a cul-de-sac right here, but Faith Baptist is going to be building there on that site, just so we know what we're talking about. So the open space, that 3+ acres, actually wraps around the entire property here. You have a streetscape here along Donaldson Farms. It's 25 foot wide. It has a berm with trees planted along it and other landscaping. It also proposes a 6-foot wood fence with some brick and stone columns behind all of those homes that would present a consistent frontage there. The applicant's also showing some brick entry features at their one entrance here across from the elementary school. You'll see they also have 3 detention basins scattered in their open space, a small one up here, sort of a linear one on the south side, and then one up here on the west side. There's a lot of topography here that guides the design on the site. They have, similar to last time, created a walking path. This is a 6-foot walking path that wraps around, goes around the ponds, loops around, but also has 2 connection points here for residents because there are sidewalks within, so they can access that. And then as well as there's a pavilion provided and some benches along the trailway there for the residents to use. All of this open space would be landscaped and maintained by the homeowners association here, and the design review committee would provide a final review of all of these improvements were they to move forward tonight. So the bulk regulations, this is a comparison of the underlying zoning. In the center you see here, this is the project that's currently approved on the site. And I wanted to compare that with the amendment so you can see what's going on there. Originally, as I mentioned, their density has increased somewhat. An item of note is that the proposal that was considered by the Planning Commission had a minimum lot size that was only 83 square feet less than what they had originally been approved. But one of the things that the Planning Commission noted when reviewing it was that all of the lots on one side of the street were 80 foot wide and the lots on the other side were 75 foot wide, which would guide what type of house plans could go on those. So one thing they did is they asked for a condition of approval to be added, and I'll show you this here, to have them mix that up so that you had some variety in the neighborhood and you didn't end up with all one house type or a couple house types on one side and the other. So they did that as was requested, and these here are the narrower 75-foot lots. I just highlighted them so you could see. The other lots are the wider lots, but you can see how they've staggered them down the street. An unintended consequence of that request from the Planning Commission was these 4 lots on the north side of the street where the lots are a little narrow or aren't quite as deep have ended up dropping below that minimum lot size that was previously being proposed. So those 4 lots are proposed at 10,500 square foot. But I would note that the other 26 lots in the subdivision are all at 11,200 or larger. So that is a result of that revision to make sure we had some variety there on the street. And those are the only 4 that ended up that way. There's no change from the approval from the front and rear setback. They've asked for no change to the minimum home size, which if you remember was 2,800 square foot heated. That doesn't include any garages, patios, things like that. The side yard setback was approved at 10 foot before. They're proposing 10 foot now, but they'd like to add an option similar to what our zoning currently has, where that could be shifted. You'd still maintain 20 foot total, but it would shift a little to allow a side load garage. On those lots with the side load, you'd have a minimum of 12. And this is consistent with what we currently do in our zoning, where you would typically have 17, but if you add a side load, you can shift it over a few feet to make that function on the lot. They've made no changes to the architectural that's proposed. This is something that the board was happy with previously. Or the plan has some typical architectural styles and requirements. They have 5 different styles that are called out in the document itself. They call out some requirements: architectural shingle, 75% brick or stone on the building, minimum 6 to 8 foot deep porches. If there's a porch on the house, oversized garages, a lot of those things, those are all still in here. Those have not been revised since since the approval. They've also provided, excuse me, some sample lot layouts, again, to show how the lots will be able to accommodate some tandem vehicles in addition to those in their garage spaces, and that those would be on the lot and outside of the area, would not be blocking the sidewalk or access. With regard to access to the site, one thing that did change slightly is the driveway was originally centered, if you remember last time. A recommendation from staff and something they took on board was they shifted that down so that it actually lines up with the median opening that's planned there in front of the elementary school. It helps out with turning movements there. So right now, you'll have this one axis that comes in. It's divided, something else that was asked of them, with the small median in the middle that would be landscaped to highlight the entrance there. And then you'll have two cul-de-sacs. Previously, this eastern one was stubbed. Some discussions led us to think that the topography would make it difficult for that connection to be made in the future. And so that has actually just been shown here as a cul-de-sac now. I will turn it over now to our engineer to discuss some of the other public improvements on site.
The roadway improvements that would be part of this development would be to, of course, internal roads within the development, but also to improve the frontage of the south half of of Donaldson Farms Parkway. The overall plan for Donaldson Farms Parkway, and this is the way we pursued it for several years, was to build the north half, the town build it using funding through the MPO, and then development would build the south half. So consistent with that, we're asking this development to improve the south half. But there is a section of their property, or a section of their frontage from about there to the west that is not owned by this developer, but it is frontage for their property. So we're asking for payment in lieu of improvements for that piece and construction of this piece. I know we had some discussion at the Planning Commission about whether you do payment in lieu of for all of that, and I think the conclusion was that's an issue of the actually the construction plan phase of the project and not necessarily tied to the PD approval. But the other thing they're going to have to do is, and again, this may relate to what's happening with Faith Baptist Church. They're extending sewer line along Donaldson Farms Parkway to serve Faith Baptist. It would also serve this property. So they're really, whoever goes first gets to extend that sewer line. So whoever's there first is going to need it. And I think at this point, Faith Baptist has approved construction plans. So most likely they're going to go first. So I think that's the roadway and sewer improvements.
Thank you. So considering it, as I mentioned, the uses haven't changed here, so the uses are still consistent. It sits with a lot of undeveloped property around it, one nearby neighborhood. The homes that were approved have not changed, so we don't see any change in that, which was previously consistent. The lot sizes, as I mentioned, you do have the 4 that reduced somewhat, but the average across the site is 12,200 plus square foot. So we feel that's still consistent with nearby. As a reminder, the Dawson's Landing is 11,700. So we're in the same range. Staff doesn't feel like that's changed enough, that the project still maintains generally what it was previously. Again, the objectives for any planned development have to be considered, and these are the 7 here that are in our code for consideration. This one still, staff feels, is accomplishing several of those by providing the amenities similar to the approved, by still calling for quality material and design in the homes that are being proposed here. They are preserving natural features around the perimeter of the site, providing housing across from an elementary school to allow access and walkability for future students, and allowing the developer to build on what is a rather challenging lot by providing some flexibility in design. So we think all those things that had been identified before are still held true with this revision. If approved tonight, there are several steps this will come back before the town with plats, construction plans, as Mr. Hill mentioned, common open space plans, and more. The Planning Commission did consider this at the revised plan and recommended approval at their last meeting, subject to the conditions that are listed here, and staff would concur with that as well. So I'm available to answer any questions you have, and the applicant is here as well.
You've heard the recommendation by Mrs. Reeder. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion by Mrs. Pardue.
Second.
Second by Mr. Biggs. Discussion or questions? I know there's going to be some. Mr. Brooks?
Yeah, I know it's been a couple of years back since we approved the original one.
Yes, sir.
refresh my memory, but I don't remember a walking path along the backside of lots 1 through 5 that interconnected and walked around, went around the whole back of the property. Was that on the original? I don't think it was.
Originally, you had two sort of triangle
Yeah.
disconnected pieces in the corner.
Disconnected pieces.
They
So-
weren't previously connected.
Now,
so
this may come out of left field to a lot of people, but in my opinion, if you're gonna build it and back it up to a set of yards like that with a narrow path in the adjoining wooded property, we were requesting that there be wrought iron fence around the rear detention on all those back lots that backed up to that. Personally, I think you need to carry that wrought iron fence around that entire walking path for a safety issue. If you're gonna block that in and bottleneck it up like that, just in my opinion, it needs to be wrought iron all the way around.
And that was,
From 1 all the way around to, is
30.
that 19?
that was discussed at planning, and we discussed the fact that the property to the east is zoned commercial and will one day develop as a commercial use. So there was a question, I mean, it's roughly 30-foot wide area through there of whether or not it made sense to require those people to have an open fencing if you were gonna have a commercial use nearby. But that was something that they brought up. They just did not condition it.
Well, in that case, and you make the commercial property fence it in, put their barriers in, but the walkway still needs to be something safe and usable by the citizens that are in the neighborhood. And if you trap it in behind a 6-foot wooden fence, that's a perfect place for problems. So that's my opinion. I'd like to see that fence extended all the way around those houses.
It was discussed at planning commission. I'm perfectly satisfied with doing what you said. So it went back and forth, and no one really screamed one way or the other, but there were some people concerned about the commercial, and they said it would be discussed at our meeting, so. here we are talking about it.
So to clarify that is, Oscar, are you talking about it going around the outside of the
So
path or
around the
around the
backside of the lots,
backyards?
on the back of the lots,
You could-
where you would put your backyard fencing,
Yes.
that should be wrought iron all the way around that to the western.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure
Walk
that
around.
you weren't saying on the other side
No,
of the walkway
absolutely
around.
not.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And there will be fencing, just to make sure and clarify, there will be fencing on the frontage of the development on the Donaldson Road side.
Correct,
So
on
you'll
the-
have a cedar fence going from one end of the development to the other. So there will be some privacy for those homeowners, 1 through 5 from the street side. But anyways, it was discussed at the planning commission. I mean, me personally, I'm fine either way. And we just need to make sure that we are cognizant when and if ever commercial development comes there, that there's a thick barrier. I mean, this board may not be here, but I'd like for that to be documented, that commercial property has some type of thick barrier put in and maybe even put a fence in.
Right.
Do what?
There's a public hearing tonight as well.
Oh, there's a public hearing. Should we go ahead? I guess we should go ahead and get in the public hearing. Oops. Let's get in the public hearing first.
Motion.
And,
Second.
so we have a motion already to close close this item and move to a public hearing. I was getting so into the proposal
Sorry
here.
about that.
That's okay. I'm the one who jumped over to it. So we are now on a public hearing. I don't have it. That's why I didn't have a sheet in here. So we are now in the public hearing for this item. This item was published in the Commercial Appeal. And is there anyone here to speak on this particular item? If you do, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. This would be for this item and this item only. Seeing none, do I have a motion to close the public hearing, resume the meeting? Motion by Mr. McKee, second by Mr. Brooks. Back on the main motion. All right, so now we're talking about the fence.
We're still on the fence.
All right, so one question, because we're going to have to get a condition on here that we have to, but, so on the fence, Mr. McKee, since you were at the Planning Commission, was there a discussion of, I know you said cedar fence, but was there anything other decorative about that fence that was discussed, or?
That would be with the DRC.
DRC, I just want to make sure, I just didn't know if there were any, no conditions on that one?
Oh, sorry. There is a condition, D, that says that they have to install a minimum 5-foot wrought iron fence on the side and rear of those southern lots, and it identifies which specific lots. We could extend that to say lots 1 through 5 as well.
Yeah, that's the only ones it's not right now.
Well, it only says, it states the back of 19. It doesn't say the southern
It-
side.
Correct.
It states the back.
Well, the sides and the rear of the lots that back
Sides
up
and
to
rear.
it. Yes, sir.
Okay.
So.
I get you.
Basically, it would
Sorry.
go from 19 across here, and then it
And it stops right
currently
there.
stopped right there at that.
Which it just makes aesthetic sense and safety to carry it on around, because who knows when that development's gonna happen with the commercial? And like I said, you make them buffer in between it and the residential neighborhood. Shouldn't be the residents' responsibility to buffer in between them and the commercial property.
Can I add something?
We're getting nods, that's okay. So, yes, Mr. Biggs.
Yeah, just because I want to, I was already going to bring this up, and it's related to what Oscar's talking about. I actually, lots 20 through 30, and actually 1 as well. You know, my wife and I were in Collierville the other day going to the movies. We had some time to spare, trying to drive around, look at the neighborhoods. And there was a similar neighborhood where you had a 4-lane road, and there was a neighborhood that adjoined it just like this. And they had wrought iron all the way, so that you're not just looking at a long wooden fence when you drive down the parkway. And they had in front of it the landscaping, and then they had a row of shrubs or hedges that were like 4 feet tall, that were well manicured by the HOA. To me, that's infinitely better looking than driving down the road and seeing a wooden fence. You know,
Well,
there's places on Milton Wilson that we have that, and it's you know, the wooden fence looks good when it's new, but then 10 years down the road, you're having, you know, we have situations where it's not so good. And then even on Milton Wilson, I was driving the other day, there was one where part of the fence was falling down right there. And so people have to drive by that. And that's the entrance into the neighborhood, and it's actually going to be the first impression people are going to get of that neighborhood. So to me, I would like you guys to consider the wrought iron fence on those lots as well.
And I would mention that there is a detail in the plan that shows, I mean, it's 25 foot wide there behind it. So they have a sidewalk, a berm that comes up and down, and on the berm they have larger hardwoods every 40 foot, and in between they have shrubs and crepe myrtles planted between all of them. So they have it landscaped on top of that berm. And then it's a wood with brick or stone columns every so often down through there, not just a solid. But that's the proposal right now, that's in the book, just to clarify.
Ms. Pardue.
So along those lines, so you're saying the landscape goes up and then down, so the fence would then, the berm
Somewhat
would
be
block
screened.
part of the fencing is what you're saying?
Yeah.
And I understand, and I like wrought iron too. Part of our fencing is wrought iron. But as you know, my son's a golfer, so we do a lot of golf courses, and there are times where you've got a whole neighborhood that did require wrought iron, and you kind of run into the same issues when it gets old. It needs to be painted, it needs to be upkept. So unless there's, you know, an equal maintenance for wrought iron, it can look just as bad as an old cedar. And so you think long-term maintenance, is it easier to upkeep on an HOA, a cedar fence versus a wrought iron fence? Not that I'm pushing for either one, just something to think about.
Well, and I somewhat agree also, because even though I like the iron better, I worry about if everybody driving down, how people maintain their backyards. Everybody's seeing in there. That would be my concern. Is
Oh,
not everybody always takes care of their backyard. The fence may look great, but the backyard may not be, and so that.
Well, that's why, you know, the example that I was given in Collierville, that's why they had the shrubs, right? I mean, you really could not see in the people's backyard. You saw the hedge and the shrub, and you saw the top of the fence, and you could see the house, but you could not see into their backyard.
Is there a way, if we're talking about putting a condition, I don't know, how to say.
Let me ask, I have a question
We're putting a
about the
condition
berm.
on the other one, but I was just asking if there's a way to kind
I mean,
of.
I know the neighborhood behind me with the lakes that are on it.
Mm-hmm.
All of the lots that back up to the lakes only have wrought iron, and it makes for, it's safer.
Mm-hmm.
If you got a kid playing around the lake, kid falls in, the neighbor sitting in the backyard, they can see the kid. So, same thing here, you're boxing it off with woods all the way around, and it just seems like a bad idea for now, to me.
You're talking about on 1 through 5.
Yeah, all the way around the backside of it.
He's talking about on.
No, he's talking about on
He's talking
30
along-
through 20.
Well, you're trying to make probably what's gonna be the most upscale, small lot subdivision outside of the preserves, so let's do it right.
Yeah.
Mr. Biggs brought up an example on Milton Wilson that doesn't work well, but there's an example on Forest, being Maple Grove, where you have a strong HOA, where it works very well. With the berm, the up and down, the variations in the sidewalk and the mature landscaping.
I like
Just a good example to go with the bad example.
How tall is the berm?
I don't know, 3 foot.
3 foot, okay.
3 foot with the plantings on top.
To
So
me,
maybe shrub, you're at 5 foot or better.
yeah,
I'm sorry. Is the sidewalk, is it kind of like at Forest Grove where it curves? It's not just a straight sidewalk, or?
It's not shown as meandering in the plans. We have, depending on how they do it, there are times when they pour the meandering where it actually will pond more. It's easier to build a straight one, but this one actually has a straight instead of meandering. That's currently, but plans haven't been put in front of the DRC for final review on the details like that.
Mr. Biggs?
Yes.
The neighborhood you saw in Collierville, was it privet and something like that that gets real heavy and dense?
It wasn't heavy. It wasn't
And
privet.
was it
It
up
was an
against?
evergreen.
Was it up against where the wrought iron fence is?
Yes.
So this would almost need a landscaping plan on the berm, because there's how much footage between the berm and the fence?
10 foot
10 foot.
to the
So,
top
I
of the
mean,
berm.
you almost
crest
would
of the
have to
berm.
have, I mean, if we did that,
Right.
you would need probably keeping what they're currently proposing for the berm.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you want to put that type of heavy shrubbery 10 foot out away from the fence because you're
Right.
still going to then just have a wrought iron open fence there. And
Yeah.
then- So you'd almost want to have like a traditional landscape package there, and then having some type of privet or something that's heavy or dense along those, or some type of boxwoods or something. But I'm just trying to think, if we did that,
I
how
mean,
would
if
we
the
manage
berm's
it?
already 3 foot,
You got it.
that's a lot. I mean, even like a small shrub on top of it,
I think that's what the.
that makes me feel a lot more comfortable. So,
Is that-
yeah, I'm okay.
Okay, so do we need to get a motion for a condition, or do we just need to put it in there? We need to get a motion on the condition for the wrought iron fence to extend around lots 1 through 5, along with the back, that the planning commission already approved?
I'll make that motion.
All right,
I'll
Mr.
second.
Brooks will make that motion, Mr. Biggs will second. Any discussion on that, Mr. McKee?
Lot 5 is a,
Wrapped
to
around?
refresh my memory, lots 19 and 6. It's wrought iron on both sides, correct? So I would propose that lot 5 essentially.
Be the same way.
Be the same way, that their side yard is also wrought iron. Anywhere have walking path, essentially having wrought iron.
We will add lots 1 through 5 to that condition D to state
Okay.
side and rear.
Okay.
Well,
We need to make a motion to
Yeah.
add lots 1 through 5 to condition D, correct? Okay.
yeah, I was just.
That was just in there.
That was just in that. That was just in, that's in the motion, so that's just in there. But I guess my question on lot 1,
It would still have a wood fence along the street
Along the street
frontage right
side.
now with the landscaping
okay.
that matched.
That's what I was making sure, okay.
Yeah.
I was just,
Yes, sir.
because I thought you were saying wrap around lot 1, okay. All right, so that's,
Good to know.
all right. So any other discussion on the condition, the motion of the condition? All right, all in favor of that condition, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passed. We're back on the main motion as amended. Other discussion. I know I have one on, it's probably for Mr. Hill, on the road. On the widening, I guess, I know I've asked before, I know we don't have it in our budget to extend 3 lanes down to Donaldson. I know we're waiting for the final plan for the road to cut all the way through. I know development is supposed to pay for that stretch going basically from Airline Road up to just past where the buses turn in. So I guess my question is it going to look, I hate to say hodgepodge, with kind of like Airline Road is right now? You know, I know sometimes not all development or not all money comes in at the same time, but I'm just wondering if that bubble is going to create more of a problem in the middle is it going to have an island in the middle, or is there going to be a turning lane?
As far as the frontage of the development here, it's going to have a median, except where you see that opening and that opening, but you'll have end of pavement there and end of pavement here with payment in lieu for the rest of that. So you're going to have a stretch of the south half of the road that really serves no purpose other than a parking lot or potentially a place for what I hear goes on right now on the cul-de-sac. People can go park. So there could be some consideration of whether that going ahead and building that now helps you much as far as traffic.
Mr. Hill, does that widen the current curb that's already there on the development side? There's already a curb on both sides, right?
Yes.
So
It does not widen the existing curb-to-curb width. It just builds the other half of the full section of Donaldson Farms Parkway. I know there was discussion.
so it builds an additional,
Two more lanes on,
yeah. So that's what I'm trying to get clear, because I'm trying to picture how it's going to bubble out and type of traffic problems, if there are any school traffic, is what I'm looking at. So you said at the Planning Commission, it was talked about possible payment in lieu of all the way down, but instead it was just payment in lieu of on the backside.
the reason, yes, we talked about payment in lieu of, rather than building this piece and that piece and having it sit there unused essentially for whatever period of time until more of the road is built, you could consider payment in lieu for a lot of it, but then you have to track those funds. The only reason I think it was brought up is because we're already taking a payment in lieu of improvements for a piece of it, so the mechanism will be in place. It'll just be the amount that changes, whether you do part of it or all of it. You obviously would want to connect, you've got to connect this piece and build that entire intersection, but you could stop and barricade each side of that and not have the issue of extra paved area that doesn't carry a lot of traffic, doesn't carry essentially any traffic, sort of becomes a parking lot.
Mr. McKee.
So we talked about this at Planning Commission. One of the things that was brought up, instead of barricading and just having empty property or asphalt not being used, is actually on the eastern end of this development for that to bleed back into the two-lane road on the other side. So you would have two lanes or one lane going west, and then it breaks into two lanes, or is that only one lane each side? I can't remember.
It's wide enough for two lanes on each side.
And so we had talked about on the most western end, most eastern end of the property, having that cut into the road. So you would actually use both sides of that road, and it would actually increase your traffic flow around the median coming in and out of the school, in and out of the church, well, not the church driveway, but the back school driveway, and you would still use the pavement and curbing that the developer's paying for. And so
you would have to sign it so that once you get to this point, it would become one way west for the north half, and then from this point back, it would be one way east.
just like it's going to be when it happens.
Just like it would be when it was ultimately built.
And you're actually going to, I would think, I'm not an engineer by any means, but I would think that that would actually reduce some of the congestion in front of the school, and it would keep that portion being built turning into just a parking lot, or as you said, a place to go parking. And
Sure.
so it's a great term. Been a while since that's been used, but
I'm an old guy. So.
Y'all don't realize.
And so that was one of the other options that was discussed at Planning Commission on how to handle that.
And I think
So let me be clear, you're saying not a barricade, but the road kind of merges.
merges back
Merges
into
back
a
in.
two-lane road,
You
heading
eliminate
back
the
out.
median somewhere in there and have a temporary connection back to what would be the existing two-lane section running out to
I
Airline.
think it'd definitely be better than a barricade, in my opinion. I don't know. Yeah.
Definitely.
But that was my main concern with this, was just the road is, I know in a perfect world, we would have it all done at the same time, but we don't. And I just want to make sure that we're cognizant of, I know the school traffic. I know I take my daughter to that school, and it is a nightmare getting in and out at the right and wrong time, all the way backed up down Airline some. So I don't know if it'll make it better or worse. That's what I'm just trying to make sure.
And I haven't witnessed it. I've been told that traffic is queuing all the way out
Yes, sir.
and onto Airline Road
Yes,
in the
sir.
morning. So from the point where we make this connection back, which is somewhere in this neighborhood, all the way back to Airline, that condition will continue.
That's right.
But you will have the loop at the end. So to the extent that you provided more storage or more places for traffic to circulate, you could do that, yes.
We have another opportunity to revisit that conversation, construction plan.
The same discussion?
Correct.
Okay,
Because the payment in lieu of comes before you, it will be with the development agreement.
Okay.
okay.
I feel a little
So
more
it
comfortable
doesn't
with
have
that.
to be decided tonight?
We can, okay. Well, then I'll drop that issue for now then, a little more research. Other questions or comments?
I was just going to address the lot changes on there. So we discussed at Planning Commission, because at one point, you were going to have 6 or 7, I believe, as they're described, courtyard garage entrances, which is essentially where the driveway and everything is in front of the house. And so we asked them, would they consider moving some of those around so that you wouldn't just have a row of courtyard side by side by side all the way down? So that the Planning Commission did put the burden on them that ended up changing the lot size, but we felt like it was a better plan than just having courtyards for one side and traditional side loads on the other. So that was the reason behind that.
Thank you. Other questions or comments?
I
Mr.
guess
Biggs.
I'll go. Yeah. Overall, I really like this neighborhood for several reasons. I like the fact that it's a pocket neighborhood. It reminds me of some of the other, like Forest Grove and some of those neighborhoods. And I think that's a good mix of having these pocket neighborhoods along with some of the larger neighborhoods. So I really like that. And, if I had my preference, I understand this is a challenging site, but I wish that the common open space was more where all the lots, I think, could see it and benefit from it, but that's not going to be the case in this situation. And I really like the 5 different architectural designed houses. I think once the neighborhood is complete, having 5 different architectural designs, and there will almost look like people bought a lot and built a house on it, instead of having all the same type of houses. So overall, I think it's a good development.
Thank you. Mr. Harmon?
I'll echo what Mr. Biggs said. It's laid out real nice. It's going to be in a high viewed area with the school. And I think with the wrought iron that we're looking at doing, safety issues, the different style houses, I think when people come into the school, that I really think that this is our way of saying, hey, this is done right. So, yeah, I like it.
Thank you.
I'll go last.
Mr.
I was going to bring up one question that we discussed at the end of the meeting at Planning Commission, which is trying to be more cognizant about trying to save mature trees. And I don't want to not be able to enjoy green space and everything, but that was a concern with Planning Commission of all of our developments, trying to preserve more of that. And so I'm just wanting us to look at that as we move forward with the development of trying to find places that we can keep some of those mature trees on that property, because it's fully treed at this point in time, except about the first 30 foot of the property, I think.
Absolutely. And they do have a statement in their plan that calls for tree preservation Now they're calling out the really large 24-inch diameter trees specifically that need to be preserved in all those open areas, but they do call for trying to maintain as much as possible. So we will look for those when we see grading and drainage construction plans.
Okay. Ms. Pardue?
Yes. I agree with Alderman Biggs. I like the architectural designs on all the homes, particularly the bungalows. I could see me living in one of those. My main question, and this is a peeve that I have on all developments that come, is asking about the width of the driveway. I am not a fan of narrow driveways, and so my question would be, is there a reason why we extended the driveway down the lengthwise of the lot instead of having a 16 minimum foot wide driveway and just allowing that on the front side? Yes, allowing there to be more width on the front. So realistically, I don't think you're going to get two cars to park tandem like that. Ideally, what you're going to end up with is one car in that driveway and that pad, and then the other on the street, because you have such a narrow driveway. So I think personally, the functionality of the driveway is better if we can have a 16-foot wide driveway in the front. I don't necessarily think we have to have the concrete pad in the back, just move that down to the front.
And our guidelines, design guidelines for residential driveways does allow that to be widened. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're thinking this portion here should be widened for their ease coming in and out. You're not crazy about this area beyond. I know a lot of people, at least in my neighborhood, have actually gone in and widened theirs a little bit because we have 12-foot wide, and it's difficult to move without running up your yard, especially with some cars. I believe by at least providing one pad just past the driveway, it allows you to get 3 cars in and on the lot that can all come in and out without another one moving.
Sure.
But I'd leave it to the, there's no reason the applicant couldn't widen the driveway to 16 foot in the front portion.
Yeah, he can just take some of that concrete off the back end, just throw it on the front end.
Unless there's a, yeah, we'll let them.
Yes, sir. Please come
reply.
and state your name and address.
David McElroy, you want my address?
Yes, sir, please.
530 Quellcrest.
Okay, thank you.
The reason the architect drew those that way, for one, he probably wanted to limit, these are some ideas or proposed footprints. We were trying to illustrate the side loads on 80-foot lots are not, normally you would like a little wider lot, but trying to get the multiple type styles in the neighborhood, we were coming up with a way of doing a side load garage on an 80-foot wide lot to keep a 16-foot drive, the extra concrete on the front. I think that's the reason the architect drew it that way. It certainly, when we get down to the planning, it's if we had a 16-foot wide all the way back where you could park 2 cars side by side, that would be perfectly good with us. He drew the long driveway as a means of showing how we can get 4 cars, 2 in the garage, 2 on the pad, to keep cars from being out on the street. So that, but as we get into the true drawing process and we're designing the actual houses, if we can have a 16-foot wide, I think we probably would prefer that. But this is a means of getting a side load garage and the extra parking spaces on the lot.
I have to agree with Ms. Pardue on, especially on the 2 illustrations on the left where the pad goes behind the house. Unless somebody put a fence across there, I just don't see that. You know, I can see 1 car going back on the side and trying to use that extra width or concrete that you would use on the back up front. So yeah, so I don't know if we need to, is that something we'd have to make a condition on right now?
Yeah, 12 foot, I mean, it's allowed.
Because basically you're asking 16 to the house, correct?
16 wide driveway.
To the house.
Yeah, so the curve would be shorter there. I mean, the little arch on each one of those would be shorter. Or even if it was, is 16 2 cars definitely? Is that, I mean, what is, I mean, well, this is 12, so.
I'm not,
It's tight, but you can, I mean, an 8-foot
Yeah.
wide parking stall is usually a compact. Just to be, require 9 spaces for parking stall in the parking lot.
Well, is,
But our code allows between 12 and 18-foot wide driveways.
I mean, you know, does anybody else have any input on this, or if we're going to, or make a condition on it, or?
I think we need to go a little wider. My house, my driveway was created probably about 70 years ago. And I've got the same situation when I have 4 or 5 cars. You know, you have to get out and move 3 to get 1 out. And really to keep from having cars parked on the street, yeah, we need to widen the front.
Okay. So I need to get a motion,
motion to remove.
motion to amend.
Motion to amend 16-foot wide driveway, please.
Got a motion?
Minimum?
Yes, that'd be great.
For clarification, are you talking about all the lots, because they've got different plans, and if you're limited in that, it may affect their ability to, have them speak to that. You can do that on every
Yeah.
one of them, may limit their plans and how they can match up with.
I guess that would, and those, what, 4 or 5 lots that are in question that we, or 6 lots?
Those will not be side load. Those will not be side load garages on those smaller lots.
We don't
So
want 60 foot on side loads around?
I think, I'm gonna ask
Well,
Cheryl.
what I refer to as the hook-in garages would be a 16-foot wide on those lots.
Okay.
That's not an issue. And again, when we get into the designing process, we're only talking about 3 feet. The big issue is the 25-foot turnaround. We were trying to get to that. You can probably get by with maybe 23-foot, but I don't see an issue with the 16-foot wide
There we go.
driveway.
On every lot?
Yes.
I just want to make sure.
Well, send it out, I really, I don't really see an issue with that at this time.
Okay.
I mean, the purpose of this drawing was to illustrate being able to try to get the side load garages. So the only thing that is really going to matter, when we get into the design, you're talking about this part being 3 feet shorter, which he's got some grass there anyhow, so you're talking about extending it out. And he doesn't have it right on the property line there, so it's probably not going to be an issue.
I think she's only referring
No, we're talking
to the
to-
curb to the house.
We're talking on the front only, the curb cut.
Curb to the house only.
Well, I thought you were talking about parking the cars in tandem. I mean, there's certainly no problem putting 16-foot.
That's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about.
Oh, yeah, that's no problem.
Yeah, we're not, we're saying you could shorten the back, actually. That's not, the back isn't as big of an issue if you only park 1. We're talking about 2 up front when people pull in your driveway and pull out to where people aren't getting blocked in. Okay, all right. All right, so we have a motion by Mrs. Pardue for a 16-foot minimum, second by Mr. McKee. Discussion or questions on that? No. All right, all in favor of that amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so we're back on the main, that item passes. We're back on the main motion as amended again. And so, any other comments? Mr. McKee?
Yeah, Mr. Hill, the pay in lieu, of course, you know I'm not a big fan of ever pay in lieu, but how do you calculate that out for the years? Because money 10 years from now is different than what money is now. So is it calculated at 10 years from now or now?
The calculation is typically done at current costs. I will tend to use a little higher unit prices than the developer is thinking he can do it for now. I have on occasion, if I knew it was going to be a certain period of time, put that much inflation in there. But in theory, if they give you a lump sum of money, you can invest it and earn interest on it. Whether or not that matches the rate of inflation, it's a gamble. So, I try to protect the town as best I can in that calculation, but it is still my best guess. And there's always a balance. If you tell the developer, if I give them a number, they may say, you know what, we think we'd rather build it than payment in lieu of, because we don't like your number. So,
And you did that, I'm sure.
I haven't given them a number yet.
Okay,
because
you will do, well,
I will
never
do
mind,
that.
I'm not going to put that on the minutes.
I think in this case, with the piece that, where they don't own the property, then we'll have to have a payment in lieu of, and they'll have to accept that number, but
Okay.
I
I
do
just
my
put a bug
best.
in your ear.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so and we still have to come back with that document anyway for payment in lieu of. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I do agree, the architectural styles you picked are, I think it'll look great, I really do.
I do, and I agree with everybody. I just, one thing in talking to a lot of people lately on, talking to a lot of HOAs, just one thing that we have to be cognizant of is that as we start requiring more and more stuff for open space and all that, you hear from a lot of HOAs that the struggles that they're under. So I know it's a challenge. I know there was originally, or in this one or another one, a dog park and stuff, and you start talking about that. So I'm glad that this one looks good. That seems to be a common theme lately from a lot of HOA meetings. So one thing that we always need to consider.
And that's a 2,800 minimum square foot, is that right?
Yes, sir.
You know, and I'm not, of course, I'm a senior also, but I'm hearing more and more seniors that can't afford to get into what we're building out here. You know, if you don't believe it, go down to the senior center and listen to some of the widows and some of the ones that just can't afford it. So, you know, 24, they might can, 22, they might can, but, you know, we got to remember that it's not just all 3,000 square foot homes need to be built. You got starter homes too. And we don't, for clarification, we don't have any zero lot line subdivisions in Arlington, do we? Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes. Thank y'all. If y'all, I know if y'all want to leave, you can go. You don't have to feel like you have to stay. Thank you. All right. So since Mr. Perkins, we ready for item A? I saw you walk someone in. If we can go back and we can go ahead and knock out item A, if you're ready. All right. So we're back on item A that we delayed. Resolution 2019-43 to authorize Mike Wisman in his capacity as mayor to enter into a contract with the Pavement Management Group to provide turnkey pavement management system. Mr. Perkins.
Thank you. This resolution would allow us to enter into a contract with PMG, Pavement Management Group, to provide a turnkey pavement management system. The proposal in its entirety is in your packet, and the total on that is $29,150. This represents about 2.25% of our total paving budget, which is an investment that staff is recommending. As you know, one of our town's largest and most expensive assets are our streets or pavement network. Currently, that equates to approximately 106 miles of roads and growing. As our streets age and deteriorate, and as maintenance costs rise, the need for a pavement management system has become more important. Currently, we are employing a worst first methodology in our approach to pavement management needs. This, in my mind, is inadequate and is unacceptable. We need a methodology with more accountability and assures the best use of every tax dollar we allocate to maintaining our streets. What we need is a consistent and rational management method that allows for optimal use of available funds, a reduction in pavement rehabilitation costs over time, identification of the most appropriate treatment for the pavement segment through roadway assessment, an estimation of pavement life extension as it relates to various treatment applications and timing of those treatments, and very importantly, an increased credibility with our stakeholders. Because when a resident calls inquiring about paving on their street, you want to be able to give them an explanation based on real data and a plan derived from proven engineering standards. These are some of the things that a pavement management system can provide. In my search over the past year for a better way, I found a group of professionals that specialize in pavement management. They utilize up-to-date technology and ASTM standards to achieve the goals previously outlined. So at this time, I'd like to introduce you to the CEO and principal in charge of that company, PMG, Mr. James Golden III.
How are y'all doing?
Good morning. Good evening, Mr. Golden.
Very good. I know your time is valuable and precious, so I won't take up a bunch of it. I've got a great streamlined presentation to kind of walk you through what pavement management looks like. This is a data-driven approach to the annual maintenance and repair of your network, leveraging ASTM standards. A little bit about myself. I've been in this business since I was age 19. I grew up in pavement and asphalt on the roadways, walking around, identifying distresses, potholes, doing all that good stuff. I had the privilege of being mentored by a civil engineer for about a 13-year career. And in 2011, it just made sense. I had an opportunity to start my own firm. So we do this type of thing you're about to see throughout the United States. I'm based out of Ohio and Tampa, Florida. And this pavement management blueprint right here, this approach, this 8 steps that we're leveraging here, gains a lot of traction because of those ASTM standards. It's not something I created in my basement last week. I am a data head. My background in education is information technology, paired in the asphalt world. But this is leveraging things from the American Public Works Association as well as U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So this is our 8-step approach. It all starts with the pavement management system, as Mr. Perkins has referenced. So the U.S. Army Corps developed paver way back in the late 1970s. It was originally called micropaver. It was built on the microcomputer. So on the mainframe, this is an APWA recommended product, American Public Works Association. We've got a great chapter out here that supports this type of a product. This is what it does. It's an industry standard. It's very cost effective in terms of an annual upkeep and all that good stuff. This is stuff that your consultant, whether it be PMG or in-house, can manage. It's got a specific set of tools. That's what makes a pavement management system above and beyond a spreadsheet or a GIS map. We can do pavement forecasting, budget analysis, and I'm going to show you some of this stuff here in the near future. Condition assessment. As you can see with just this system right here, I'm showing you just a map. You know, you can quickly identify the conditions of your roadways right within your system. It's a total package. It's a total package. And the value of a pavement management blueprint from companies like Pavement Management Group is that you don't have to be a paver expert. You know, you don't have to be an expert. We package deliverables in a great communicative and collaborative way that you'll all see here in a few minutes. It all starts with your inventory. As Mr. Perkins mentions, about 106 centerline miles of pavement here in the town of Arlington that you're required for maintenance and repair. What this does is it piggybacks on what we've already got, and we break the network down block by block. So if you take a look at that new site plan you were just taking a look at, you know, intersection to intersection, it's getting data on the roadways. So length times width. You can kind of see through here. It's probably difficult in the colors, but this is a typical residential neighborhood. So the colors are just indicating block by block becomes a section. And within that section, we're tracking all the maintenance history, you know, all the work that's been going on. Is it curbed? Is it striped? You know, when was the last time it was constructed? It's all this great database being held by the pavement management system that we can refer to just with a click of the mouse, if you will. So as Mr. Perkins was referencing, if a resident calls in and says, hey, I'm interested in, you know, what's kind of going on in the future, what's been going on the last 5, 6, 7, 10 years in my neighborhood, we can call that data up pretty quickly. We take video of the entire network, 1080p HD network, full network video. This is just a sample of what that looks like. So for every one of those pavement sections that you just saw, we'll actually have a video with eyes on the pavement that we can reference. We actually upload this to a cloud-based system, if you will, that can be streamed to the desktop. So you can imagine having a round table. I don't know if you have a street committee, or I know you do some planning and things like that. This is an opportunity where you can get together and actually call up videos and have quick conversations. It's good for fire, EMS. There's multiple uses. We're selfishly using this for the pavement component for ASTM standard condition assessment. So the online dedicated access, we give you a channel. You can go to the channel. You can browse and search, go straight to a video and take a look at it, things along those lines. Google Earth, how many of you have been in Google Earth before? You know, we've got, you'll see in the mapping component here in a section, we'll have all the conditions overlaid on top of that, but you'll have an icon you can click. So it's kind of map driven as well. So this is something that we love engineering, but this brings that type of you know, product to the rest of us, so that we've got you know, good eyes on what's happening out there. I didn't realize this was going to actually work, so this is awesome. So my video, you can kind of see, kind of stepping through. I've got a video on here. Not the best, it's because of the connection here, but you can kind of see in your mind's eye, this is what your perception would be when you click on a video. This is what it's going to look like. Our camera is mounted on the outside of the vehicle. It's at about a 45-degree angle towards the front of the vehicle. We don't impair the traffic at all, or the public. So our drivers We're sitting in there, we're following traffic speeds, posted speeds, all that good stuff. So no impact, little impact to no impact on the traveling public. We mentioned the ASTM International Standards. This is a great way to assess conditions of pavement networks out there. Basically for asphalt pavements, there are up to 20 different distresses that can occur out there. So we're all driving around every day and we're seeing different types of cracks and potholes and things like that. Or maybe you're noticing something's a little rough as you're driving. Each one of those things you're seeing out there means something potentially different. And that's what the purpose of this is. It's identifying what's happening out there in a block by block format, documenting it. Is it load associated distress? Is it climate related? You know, things like that. We've got eyes on it. And then we package it into this PCI right here. So we're documenting the different types of distresses, the severity levels, the quantities, we're quantifying it. We've got good information for the engineering side of the house, you know, in terms of deduct and density and all that boring stuff. You know, basically we're packaging into this PCI, 0 to 100 score, you know, from failed pavements all the way up to excellent. GIS and Google Earth, that's what I was just referencing. So we're gonna leverage that ASTM standard, all those conditions and documentation of distresses. We're going to package that into a map-driven environment. So now you're going to have those condition categories that you're seeing right here overlaid on top of a map. And I don't believe that this is, we'll see if this is going to play here. Yeah, it looks like it's going to, so things are going well. You can see we're in Google Earth's environment right now, zooming into a city. And, you know, we're zooming into a specific area. I know it's a little bit difficult to see, but each one of those points, if you zoom in close, is going to be an icon that can be clicked on to stream the video, and that's what we're going to demonstrate here in a few seconds. You can kind of see all the different variations of color, yellows, reds, magentas, blues as I'm zooming in, greens. Those are your different conditions. We're going to let this thing play out a little bit, and you can kind of see what we're showing here. So by simply leveraging Google search, you can search here, go straight to a street, see the condition of it, good, fair, poor. You can click on the icon, and now we're rolling video. So internally, as we're having discussions on maintenance and repair and things along those lines, this gives us a great opportunity in the office without having to go out and, you know, mobilize and go out there to take a look and get eyes on it within the office and have those conversations. Finally, this is what it's all about. It's leveraging all this data to develop long-term planning mechanisms. You know, my whole sole goal as a consultant, you know, I love my job, obviously. I do this throughout the United States, is to try to maximize your annual budget while optimizing your overall conditions. So you have a budget currently that you're spending each year. It would be nice to know, what is that ROI in terms of a condition? Are we gaining ground? Are we losing ground? That's what this stuff does. You know, we've got an ASTM standard backing the condition assessment piece. We can plug that into the pavement management system, and we can take a look at these maintenance policies. You know, it's basically developing a decision tree, if you will. You know, and we can all have those conversations and talk about what are the needs of the network today, what are some treatment options we're prepared to take a look at, and where do they fit in the grand scheme of things. You know, as you can imagine, when you look at your town on 106 centerline miles, when this project would be done, if it were to be done, you're going to have different colors on your maps. Good roads, bad roads, good things along those lines. So it's all about the right pavement, the right treatment, the right time. That's the whole initiative. That's how you really maximize your annual budget, get your best return on your investment, while optimizing roadway conditions for the rest of us in the public. And that's what this stuff does. You can kind of see we can run multiple scenarios. This was a specific city that was currently spending about $1.3 million prior to having a pavement management program. It was a number that they'd just been kind of using and rolling with. There was some rhyme and reason. The city engineer was doing the best thing that they, you know, the best that they could to put the values and information out there. This network was about 156 centerline miles. And this is what was going to happen if they continued that trend of spending $1.3 million based on the depreciation of the pavement. Because we've got data, pavement models, all that good stuff, right? So right away, they looked at about a 1.8 million. You know, we can come in here and have a conversation with all of you and show you good information to see what we can yield with that. And what that found was we could pretty much maintain about a 70 PCI condition. Now in the state of Ohio, which is where this is from, that's a pretty good condition. Pretty good condition, okay? Our freestall cycles are a little different up there than down here, right? So down here, we're probably striving for these type of numbers right here. So the advantage of this is, with the Army Corps developing this process and becoming a standard, you can piggyback off the PCI, Pavement Condition Index, regardless of where you're at. in terms of climate and things along those lines. So it's all relative. It's all about, in like the city of Lakeland, for example, or town of Lakeland next door, they may have a different starting number than you. They may be doing different things than you, But this is a way to leverage all of this data backed by international standards, ASTM standards, to produce some pretty good results and go down the road of where are we going, and putting plans together each year and every year on how to get there. These are what our final project deliverables look like. We'll present to you a final project report. It's a great read. It's about 10 pages, graphic-driven, map-driven. Inventory condition report. This is a great spreadsheet right here that my engineers and public works directors love to look at. Basically seeing all the inventory items and where they fall today. The GIS condition maps, kind of showed you those. Obviously the Google Earth project file, so you can access that and take a look. The streaming videos, on-site project review. I do this type of thing a lot. I consider myself part of the team, an extension of the team with all my clients. And obviously the paver software. Continued support. This is one thing we really pride ourselves on. As a company, where we've been able to really gain some traction is we're not a one-off, we're not project chasers. We're really trying to, enhance and add as much value to your processes as possible. We love to become an extension of the team, Looking at, rooms like this, coming together, looking at project recommendations, budget recommendations, providing training to your service and your staff here, multiple budget target-driven scenarios. You may develop a 5-year plan. In year 2, we have a situation where we have to either spend a little bit less funds on the pavement assets, maybe a little bit more, whatever the case is. So this becomes a living, breathing thing that we can revisit, as often as you'd like, to be honest with you. So really just becoming an extension of your team, working with you to help develop the project, to deliver a data-driven approach to this annual budget. That's really about it. I try to streamline this as best as possible to give you some good information up front, and hopefully you have some questions.
Okay, you've heard the recommendation by Mr. Perkins. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Brooks.
Second.
Second by Mr. Biggs. Just for a point of clarification, is this a one-time fee right now with annual cost after that, or I just see the price in here?
Depending on what we want to do going forward, this is for all those things, that initial assessment, and provide those reports, those kinds of things. You'll remember we tried to partner with MPAS to do that. It was going to kind of be a once and done, kind of give us a snapshot of where we are. PMG will do a lot more than that initially, but we can partner with them going forward. Maybe doing a set reassessment every 3 years or so. Okay. It's just a better way of trying to manage our pavement.
Okay.
Yeah, and your costs are decreased, obviously, as
yes.
well.
Okay.
As you kind of go there.
Questions?
No questions, but I got a comment. I will say that Terry and Steve have done a great job, but like me, they're not road professionals. So having somebody on their side that gives them some guidance and some leverage and some know-how, it's a win-win, in my opinion. Just in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know.
For help.
I don't know how many times I've asked you probably in the last year, every time I kind of bumped into you, hey, where's that MTAS study?
Yeah, and we've been trying to, we got what we paid for. And it's free.
Yeah, no, well, so I'm happy that, yeah, exactly, we got what we paid for.
Well,
so,
and like I said, this represents really a small investment compared to our whole paving budget, but I think it's necessary to have a measured way of doing things going forward.
Absolutely. The number one question that I get from residents when I bump into them is, when is my road going to be repaved? And so now to have these roads scored, and you're not that you guys did randomly pick, you didn't, but you did an evaluation, but now we have an actual score, and I think it will help us also in budgeting as well, long term. I'm eager now to get the report back, because we might not be putting enough money into roads. I don't know. I want to get that report back so I can see, if we want to be here in 5 years, what's it going to take to get there? So I'm 100% in favor of this.
I can tell you right now, Mrs. Durant and Mr. Perkins are going to tell us we're not putting enough money in the roads.
Nobody is, so don't feel bad.
Nobody does.
That was the only question I had, what Ms. Durant thought about it.
I like that.
Yes.
Data-driven approach
Yeah.
budget. We've been asking for it for about 10 years.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's been one of those things that, because we are a growing community, we're a young community in many ways when I say that. And with that, a lot of the infrastructure, and people don't realize that a crack in the road, that if their subdivision is 10 or 12 years old, how long is a road supposed to last? You know, and you know, not every little ding or pothole gets a whole repaving for the neighborhood. And so that's with us being at that age of the growth in the mid 2000s, and then the growth and the stuff that we're building now. You know, it's going to be an ongoing problem, is what I'm saying. So, or an ongoing issue. So we need to make sure that we're managing it properly.
And this kind of gives us a guideline as to, or a better way of judging, hey, what type of treatment do we need to do? Maybe we don't need to spend money on a total repave when maybe it just needs a seal coat or crack sealing, those types of things. So it helps you to allocate funds appropriately. You know, it gives you a better strategy to spend your dollars more wisely.
Better accountability.
Yes. Questions or comments?
I'm assuming you're all in favor of this, Kathy?
Yes, sir.
Can you be done by tomorrow afternoon?
Yeah.
That's part of the contract right there. So.
Unfortunately, he's in high demand apparently. I think we're looking at probably last quarter this year, maybe the first quarter next year.
Okay.
We'll kind of, if you choose to pass this, we'll get on the list.
Okay.
Hopefully get this done as soon as he's open.
Questions, Mr. McKee?
Sooner than later.
Unless y'all had something first, go ahead. So this is out of my realm completely. So your team will come in and film and drive around town, correct? How often do those get updated? Are y'all coming in and filming X number of years, or are we gonna then begin that and put that on our trucks and do that instead?
The great thing about this, kind of why I did this, you can leverage that internally as well down the road. That is something that you could absolutely do in-house. You have a fleet. You can follow the process. We use GoPro cameras. I would love to say this is a $5 million operation here. It's not. Really looking for simplicity and streamline, leveraging standards. So our recommendation for your climate is about every third year, a reassessment and a remapping of the videos. Now the process, one video individual can capture about 15 to 20 miles on site a day. So you can see in your town situation, within a week, you could have all that captured in a 5 to 6 hour, you know. We're not out there, you know, impacting the buses and, you know, we take a look at all that stuff, I promise you. So in about a 5 to 6 hour capture window, you can capture about 15 to 20 miles. In this process, every 3 years, if you see value in getting those videos updated every year, you can do that.
My thought is we're going to, not that you're going to film a brand new street, I'm assuming, a brand new neighborhood, but I'm assuming these videos are used so that Terry can have conversations with y'all in being remote, to have conversations about how the street maintenance is progressing, how the program is working. Hopefully it's saving us money. I mean, if we're going to go into this, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around the filming process, the process of maintenance with that, and the process of long-term agreement with that. And is that something we just continue to do and upload onto the site so y'all can have continual conversations?
Yeah, as we go, some of this information, as we do treatments, we capture that information, put it in paper, and it also changes the outcome down the road.
Okay.
How do you know, every street's not used the same amount, you know, you got a calculation you use. How do you capture, you know, let's say a Milton Wilson, for instance, has got higher traffic than Forest Grove? How do you calculate that?
Love the question. That's the beauty of what the U.S. Army Corps developed. We take a look at, there's only 20, as definition, you know, as defined, there's only up to 20 different things that can happen to an asphalt pavement and 19 to a concrete. So ADT, more truckload, you know, weighted, that will, you know, accelerate some of those processes, but it's all being documented no matter what. Whether you have a cul-de-sac street service 10 residents, where you've got a arterial, super arterial railway out there serving 35, 40, 50,000 every day. It's a tried and true process and standardized. So alligator cracking is alligator cracking. You know, fatigue cracking, distresses, you know, they occur regardless of the type of traffic that's on it. So by documentation, like every third year, keeping eyes on that, developing the history, and see where it's trending and tracking. That's how we do it.
Because it's, you know, you can't do a traffic study on every street in Arlington.
That's right. So by capturing the video and then post-processing that information to the standard in a you know, quality controlled environment versus walking around like the old days. I was out there walking around doing all that, you know. So now you've got that information. So we take a look at an arterial roadway, for example, 4-lane roadway, it's servicing 40, 50,000 cars every day. Year in, year out, we can kind of see how that's trending in terms of condition.
Okay.
Based against the standard.
Pavement tells you a story.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Every pavement tells a story. New ones, yes.
Mr. Harmon.
I see this as a good beginning to kind of give us direction on how to spend the money, how to plan which streets we do. I see it as an excellent tracking tool. And as you were saying, some streets that are more heavily used, this right here, we'll be able to keep our eye on it and say, okay, look, why are we having more issues right here? And with the documentation, we can.
It's 100% a great example. This happens a lot, you know, especially as with growing cities. You may have some roadways that may have been designed for 20, 30 years, but you're finding that due to complaint or in-house, we're finding maybe it's only lasting 7 to 10, 12. You've got the information to go right to and identify and pinpoint exactly what the root cause of that is, to either rectify it, remediate it now, and better planning long term. So,
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That item passes. Thank you very much.
thank you all.
Take care. Are you turning around, jumping back on the plane?
He's got to drive around the How many hours you got left in town? You can start driving now. Let's go.
Right now. Well, we'll tell you, it's something exciting. We're not quite there yet, but we're bringing on our artificial intelligence to help streamline that and bring the cost down.
Now you're scared.
We'll say it by
You're making me nervous now.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, on to item C, Resolution 2019-45, to authorize amendments to the Town of Arlington Design Guidelines, Manuals, Chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4, to correct misprints, incorporate updates to preferred building materials, and encourage pedestrian scale design and LED lighting use. Mrs. Reeder.
All right. I was going to tell you to read a little slower, but I think we got it. Okay. So it's been a while, and then when I started looking back, I didn't realize it had been quite this long. But last December, I started talking with our design review committee about updating our design guidelines. We had noticed some items where there had been, it's been a while since it was last amended, 2009. There were some items that were a little out of date. There were some corrections, and then we just wanted to make sure we were still on track with what the goals of the town were. So, excuse me. So the design review committee started working on this, started discussing it at different meetings. We talked about it last December. We had several meetings at the beginning of the year, actually ended up being canceled, so it came back May, June, July. Each month we brought back revisions. We had good conversations at the meetings for consideration. And ultimately last month on July 9th, the committee was presented with the final draft of what they had worked on. They did vote unanimously on to recommend the amendments that are in front of you tonight to our design guidelines manual. As the board that can adopt those changes, presented them to you here tonight. I've got all of the red line text up here. It's really exciting text, so I'm just kind of going to summarize what we've done, and then I can go back if you have questions afterwards. So we're basically changing 4 chapters, 1, 2, 3, and 4. The introduction is the first, and in here it's just a correction and a cleanup. It still said that we had 9 DRC members. We have 7. We've had 7 for a little bit. So just a cleanup there to reduce confusion. I also added some language in there. It stated that we would take applications within 30 days for consideration. I added the word complete because sometimes we don't get all the information we need. That's just a cleanup and a cover for staff to make sure we're not being rushed on items that aren't ready. That was pretty much it, and some typos at the beginning. Chapter 2 is the some corrections. Chapter 2 has to do with the bulk regulations and uses. This is where the bulk of our conversation and the changes actually occurred. The first change that we made was to clarify our primary materials. So our design guidelines talk about design, and they talk about what materials shall be used in design. We actually have a list of primary, and in that, it was determined from the design review committee that there was no longer a wish that stucco be listed on there as a primary material. It was something that we were interested in removing down to a secondary at most to reduce the percentage of what can be used on a building. As written, a primary could actually be used to construct an entire building, and that was not something that the design review committee thought was intended when this was originally drafted. So we changed that. We did some clarifications of some items where there was some redundancies, where we said that you could have stone, and then we called out some specific ones. I also changed some language where we used hardy plank to state fibrous cement board, so instead of referencing a specific brand. Just some clarifications and cleanups there. Let's see, that's with regard to primary. The next section in our guidelines here has to do with secondary materials. So secondary materials are those that are intended to add detail and interest, but not necessarily something we want to see for the entire building. So we did move stucco to the secondary material here with EFS, which was already on that section. We talked about the intent of what a secondary material was supposed to be to make that clear to developers. They also increased the max percentage of secondary. It was previously 10%, and when we started looking at buildings that we were designing, realized that a lot of the ones that were being proposed and the town was actually considering and thought were good-looking designs were using more than just 10% on those secondary, a lot of times with the base, things like that. So between the committee and some of our architects, they had a long discussion about how building form was designed, how the eye sees buildings, how things are traditionally built in thirds, and what made sense. So they ultimately ended up with 30%. That had ranged during our conversations from about 20 to 30, and 30 is where it ended. We also, considering the concerns about stucco and EFS that had been expressed, we added language that was not there previously that said if you use those materials, you shouldn't use them within 3 feet of grade or from the ground level, because there are concerns about them getting dirt or getting damaged, and that's something that happens. And we called out specifically place where you have regular contact with people or equipment, just to make that clear. And that's something we had been doing when we saw buildings that were using it, but just to make it crystal clear here. Also, there was a request, and something we added was that on a street-facing facade of a building, that if EFS is used, that it only be used on ornamental details on that one facade. You're still allowed to use it around the building, but just on the front, to limit its use there to only those ornamental details along the top of the building, for example, on a cornice. Moving on, we discussed non-preferred, clarified a few things there. We added painted masonry as something that was a non-preferred in non-residential construction. Put a little bit more information on the gray or textured concrete block to make sure everyone clearly understood that is something the town did not want. We have not permitted construction of that as an exterior material, but we wanted to make it clear so people reading this knew on the way in that didn't have to be told by staff after they had designed something. Moved on to window and door framing systems. Clarified that bronze and black systems is our preferred here in town on the windows. But that if, while you should avoid the anodized or silver, if it complemented the overall scheme, that the DRC did have the ability to consider it. And it has been used on many buildings throughout town. Even if you look at our First Tennessee Bank down there, I believe they have one, where it complements the design and the darker colors didn't make sense. So we wanted to clarify what's preferred, but give that option if the DRC felt like there was a need. We added some language that requires color renderings be provided and color sample boards, material sample boards be provided. It was encouraged before. Now it's specifically called for, and we actually call out sample sizes to make sure we get enough. You're not looking at a paint chip this big trying to decide how that's going to look on a 20-foot tall building. So they felt like that was something that would help them when reviewing plans and help staff have the teeth to actually make them bring it in. Right now, I'm recommending, it would really help your project if you brought something. So they wanted to make sure we were clearly asking for it. We added a couple different sections of language about consistent style throughout. And some of this was in there. We just wanted to repeat it and make sure it was said in a couple different ways. Pedestrian scaled, called out that the base on buildings should be masonry or stone was the typical base that we look for when you provide one, because we had language that said for scale you should have a clear base and a cap on a building, but we wanted to tell them what we meant. The next chapter we changed was chapter 3, which is landscaping and screening. We added a little bit of flexibility on our street tree spacing because our landscaper on the committee kept telling us that some of the species that were being put in were going to be crowded once they built up, and we had that very specific set distance. So he wanted us to add some flexibility based on what tree species was put in. That made sense. We fixed a few typos that were in the section. We clarified that backflow preventers should be in inconspicuous locations. There was some language to that effect in here, but we wanted to say it straightforward, because we've had a few end up in weird spots recently. We also, and this came in sort of later in the game, but we added some guidelines for irrigation plans. The town had always required irrigation of all landscaping. There hadn't been a whole lot of guidance for what people needed to do with those irrigation plans. So we had the benefit of a landscaper on our committee. He provided some language in there that at least gave us some guidelines to hold people to when they submit those irrigation plans to us. Currently, we just had to make sure they were going to irrigate, it was underground, and everything was going to get water on it, not necessarily the smartest way. So this has some things in it about rain sensors, things like that, that we think will help us. The next section was chapter 4, and that's site design. This one included a lot of information on lighting, and we realized we didn't have the word LED anywhere in our plan, which made us feel like we were kind of back a little outdated. That's a good way to put it. So we went through and updated some of this to say that we actually prefer energy-saving LED technology be used here in town. We referenced some guidelines that call for some auto-dimming features, which is something that we had conditioned a lot of our projects in the last several years, commercial projects, specifically if they were near more sensitive areas, to have some auto-dimming at night. But we thought, why not put it in here if it's something that we've consistently wanted? So we've added that language in here to make sure that gets done. There's some clarification. This, again, something we were doing was any commercial or non-residential had to have a enclosure for their dumpster. We've had some uses that didn't need dumpsters. They were small enough they could use a roll-off cart, and we wanted it clear. They also have to screen it. We don't just want them sitting like a house. So the code was added to revise that. And then lastly, there was a section that said anything with 2 or more tenants needed a comprehensive sign plan. It's a lot of work to do a full comprehensive sign plan and bring it forward for review, keep up with those here at Town Hall. We felt 2 was a little much, so we revised that to at least 4 or more tenants. so that they have some consistency. So those are the amendments that are proposed by the Design Review Committee. As I said, they spent quite a bit of time going through these and trying to just bring us up to date a little bit, and I can answer any questions you might have for it.
You've heard the recommendation by Mrs. Reeder. Do I have a motion to approve?
Is it a public hearing or not?
Yeah, well, we got to get a motion first. Do we have a public hearing? No.
It is not a public
It's
hearing,
not?
no.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure.
So we just need a motion on the floor right now. Motion. Second. Motion by, who made the motion? Ms. Pardue, and second by Mr. McKee. All right, discussion or questions? I will say just thank you. I know it's been a lot of time involved, a lot of questions. This document is a little over 10 years old. It's been a good guide for us. It's been, it's set the tone for a lot of things, and nothing wrong with giving some updates from time to time as things change or make improvements. So thank you for that, and thank you, Mr. Biggs, and your committee for working on that. So is there anything you'd like to start out with?
Yeah, just, I guess I'd like to thank Angela for all the work, and it was several months of us going back and rethinking and retalking things. Tommy Reyes is here. He's on the committee, so he knows what we went through. So I will say this just so you guys are aware. We had discussions about each of these items just like we do in here, and sometimes it wasn't always 100% agreement on every single one of these changes. There were times where maybe 2 people or 1 person or 3 people maybe didn't agree, but if we didn't vote, but we could tell if a majority of the committee felt a certain way, then it got added into these revisions. So just to kind of give you guys a heads up on that.
Is that all you have?
Well, I wish I had the patience of Harry and could wait till the end.
Go ahead, man, I'm going to wait till the end.
I just don't, I know you are, and I just don't. I'll just make a couple comments. One of the biggest changes about the stucco being from primary to secondary was that we all agreed on that, and I was really happy to see that. One of the conditions that there was a lot of discussion around is moving the secondary materials from 10% to 30%.
I wasn't going to wait till the end to ask that.
Okay, so I'll be honest with you. I was happened to be one of the members that was not in favor of that. I think we recognize that 10% is too low because if you have a 10-foot wall, that means your base. You're talking about a base of a foot. So me personally, I was more comfortable with 20%, and let's see how. Let's see what we get and what the projects look like if we have 20%. So that was one that we did discuss. And the other one was the ephes as an ornamental versus a secondary material on the front elevation. And again, the majority of the committee felt that that was good. I personally made the argument that if we're admitting that ephes is a subpar material to stucco, because basically that's what we're doing. If we're not allowing on the front, why would we allow it on the sides and the rear? But a majority of the committee felt that that was doable. So, and then the only other question I have for Angela, and I may have missed it,
Sure.
but I thought we discussed adding acronyms to the guidelines, that we would review the guidelines like every 5 years. I thought we discussed putting a time frame so that it wouldn't go 10 years again.
Or
like we
no
did this.
more than.
Yeah, or no more than.
And I think what we ended up with is that it was probably more appropriate in the bylaws of the DRC that be one of their obligations would be to reconsider it. I think that's where that conversation ended, as opposed to in the guidelines itself. It should be looked at. I mean, I look at the zoning ordinance and try to bring something annually in front of us. We don't want to make changes that often, but probably more than every 10 years would be warranted.
So, I guess, is that something that the DRC is going to discuss and to make those changes in the bylaws, or is that something that you can just change?
I can bring those up for consideration. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Mr. McKee?
So just to go on that question, does this board dictate what the bylaws are, or does the DRC dictate their bylaws for that?
I'd have to look and see who.
So if we wanted the DRC to at least look at it would come through this board to make that decision, not themselves, correct?
I'm sure we go to them first for a recommendation for your consideration, much like this amendment.
Okay.
I think, or are you asking if we just require in the bylaws, is that what you're asking?
Would we be the ones changing in the bylaws, or would they change it themselves?
And-
Or are they going to make a recommendation to us, as Kathy just said, to us for us to consider and pass as a bylaw?
Looking to Ms. Reader.
And I'm sorry, I'm just.
That's fine. If you-
confirming
If you
real
don't
quick.
have that answer tonight, I'm okay with that. I would
Yeah.
just like to know
There's a
that
section for provisions for amendment that say that they can be amended by a majority vote of the membership of the DRC at any time by being on one of their regular agendas.
Okay.
Unless I'm
So
missing
they can
anything.
change the bylaw with the majority vote for themselves
They
on
can,
that.
so that's
Okay.
something they could add in.
Okay.
And then does it come to the board for approval? Yeah.
If you're concerned about the DRC doing that without the board's approval, it still will come, if they make recommendation changes, it's still an amendment to the guidelines that's approved by this board. So
It wasn't really a concern as much as I was just curious of the process of what the approval would
ultimately,
be.
it's still approved by this board.
Okay. The secondary material going from 10% to 30% is a concern to me. I may be the lone wolf on this one. Me personally, I'd just as well take stucco to the same as EFS and get it off of secondary material if it's going to be a 30% approval. But again, I may be the only one there, and I may be able to be talked out of it. But that was my first concern on that. And then if the material, secondary material can only be used 30%, and they decide not to use it on the front, does that 30% then move to the other three sides?
It's 30% of the building elevation. So yes, obviously you could put it on whichever side you wanted. We've had situations, for example, like the Aber building, where there was a discussion specifically on that one about bringing all the brick to the front and moving all the stucco to the side. And the architect made the argument, and the DRC agreed on that point, that then it looks like you've kind of neglected the rear of the building. Our guidelines also, by putting, one material up front and the other on the back, our guidelines also call for architecture to be included on all sides and to be treated equally. So the thought was that, and what the DRC discussed when they talked about the EFS and the opportunities for that, is that they didn't want to raise the cost of construction to the point that local businesses and your mom and pops didn't have any options to reduce. We recently had a church here where we talked about giving them some flexibility on where they use materials. They took that in mind and said, let's try to reduce it on the front because of the potential for maintenance issues. Let's raise it off the ground, and then, while it's a material that can be used, let's just limit it on that front facade, so if maintenance isn't being upkept. Now, anything maintenance needs to be done on, but they just recognize that as a concern, so.
I think my concern, majority is that I think we need to limit how much can be put per side if we're going to allow an overall percent, so that you can't take 30%. If it's an extremely long, wide building, right, and you take off, and the whole building, you're allowing 30%, you're taking that part away, and now you're putting it on the sides, and you can overwhelm and end up with almost a majority of your side of your building with stucco. And that's a concern for me. So if we're going to have 30% as a whole is our maximum, I think we should have also a maximum on per side of whatever, that's 10%, whatever it is, 30% as a whole and no more than 10% per side. Something like that, so that we're not, I'm just trying to come up so that we don't end up with stucco as a side of a building. And I know DRC can turn things down based on the looks of it and everything, but I also know that they can be put in precarious situations with people wanting to try to get things the way they want it done.
They can. The concern that they had was that if you start dictating so much and get tied into the percentages, you end up sort of reducing flexibility or causing something you're not intending. The thought about the 30% was, just as Mr. Biggs said, if you have a wall and you want to use some material for your base around, and that's roughly a third of your building, you know, the 30% would allow you to do that around the entire perimeter of the building. I mean, you could try, maybe we could add some language that it not all be used on one side. I think the current guidelines that state you have to have a consistent architecture on all four sides would keep you from having one that was completely different than the other three. But I could see how you might want to say the entire six.
I just know there's people out there that are willing to try to manipulate the system in their own benefit.
They'll find a loophole,
and
I agree.
and I'm trying to minimize that as much as possible.
Sure.
And so it's almost, if, you know, 30% of a building is X square footage of a total building, that those sides shouldn't be able to be increased above that square footage of a side or rear of a building just because you take it off of one portion. Did I lose you?
So you're saying you want 30% per side maximum, not 30% for the entire
That
building?
doesn't give you any flexibility above, I mean, if you had it like 50 or 60% max per side, so that you're saying not 100%, you couldn't have 10% like your example when you talk.
My percentages were wrong. I get that.
You got 30% of the whole building, just say it's 10,000 square feet, you got 3,000 square feet you could use hiring on the side. That would be equally proportional of the 30% of each wall or each side of the building. But if you're gonna reduce it on the front, then you ought to be able to proportionally increase it to 50 or 60% on the side, maybe not 100%, I see what you're saying.
See, and I disagree with that. I think that if the 30%,
But you're still allowing a 30%, so if you require less than 30% on any one side, or then you're not allowing.
so if 30% of 3,000.
30%'s gotta be your minimum, you see what
So
I'm saying?
I understand, but 30%, if you had a 3,000 square foot building and 30% of the facade was allowed to be used on it, we're going to throw out numbers that aren't factually correct. But whatever that number is for the building, I think, in my opinion, you deduct that off of the total. So if it was, 500 foot per side, and they decide, and we're like, no, you're not putting it on the front of the building, then you shouldn't be able to add 500 a foot to the rest of the building because you're taking it away from the front. It should only be 1,500 feet left if you
But
started.
that's just, I mean, this is for any secondary materials. They could use 3 different secondary materials. It doesn't necessarily mean it's all gonna be stucco. You could have, metal panels or something like that. It's just, I mean, and that intent can be taken out so that we're just even across the board. Take the thing off about limiting EFS on the front. That was a sort of last minute, there was a concern about it being on the front and the thought about it being as detail only. That was a concession to try to limit it on that front side, so.
I'll be quiet after this statement, and I'll let some other people talk, sorry. I do like the fact that we're having now lighting plans stamped by a lighting professional. Will that also be in place for existing businesses that update their lighting packages?
That's been a concern recently. I've had to talk to a few different businesses about that. And yes, we did require, for example, Zips did some stuff. I did require them to bring in a photometric plan to show us their revision once they added some shielding and things to those lights. So that is something we've done. I can now point to this as being a requirement that it be a licensed professional engineer.
Did that happen when they changed businesses, or was that just after they already owned it?
They owned it for a little while and decided to change the
Okay.
lights one day.
Do it on their own.
Yeah, I mean, because the gas station at 70 is the obvious one that occurred recently that was glowing and you could see it from Google Earth.
Now it is battery.
And so the thing is I like the fact that you have to have a stamp by a lighting professional. I just want to make sure that somebody can't just start going out and replacing with the brightest LED bulbs possible in their existing cans and say, well, it's the same lights, it's the same, they still have to go through the process of giving the information and getting a lighting package stamped by a lighting
They're
professional.
supposed to. A lot of people don't realize
get
that
it.
there's a step, but this will require it. Yes, sir.
Do I have you for now? Other questions or comments? Ms. Pardue?
I guess for me, it's still on the 10 and 30%. If we had, the DRC guideline said 10%, and then we have a lot of buildings that have been approved at 30%. So what was the reasoning that they gave the variances on so many buildings?
So the guidelines state that they have the flexibility in certain designs to consider some exceptions or some variation of this. So it was just noticed that over the last 10 years since this was put in place, that the buildings and the designs that we're putting forward that they felt were visually attractive and met our design guidelines, a lot of them actually were using more than that 10%. So the comment was made, if we're consistently seeing buildings that we like that take more than 10% to provide that interest, why are we still telling everybody to try to design something with only 10% when they bring it to us? Why not tell them to design something with the interest that we want, and then we can work with them when they get here? If you decided and you were concerned and we did only take it to, for example, a 20% like Mr. Biggs, that would still be an option for the design review committee if the building makes sense. It just felt like we were being disingenuous with people coming in, saying we only want 10, and then when they bring it, we're like, well, can you bump this up and make this look a little nicer? Why not try to be closer and more realistic with what the town goal is? So they still have flexibility on design. This is truly guidelines for that.
So to follow up on her on the 10, 20, 30%. So even if it's
Sure.
20%, they still have the flexibility. 25%,
Yes.
they still have the flexibility. So
They do on a case-by-case to consider material considerations.
My concern is with 30%, see, I think you have less flexibility. Because now, if they come in with something that is 30%, and you're like, this, I don't know, that's too much secondary material, now we're asking them to go beyond what our guidelines say. I'd rather put us in a position to where, we say 20, for example, 20%, and they come back and go, you know what, we looked at it, we're going to present 25%, would you consider this, and let us look at the building, determine, you know what, you're right. For this building, it makes sense for it to be 25%. The problem with 30% to me is, what if they come in with 25% and you're going, well, we don't think that looks right, it needs to be 20%. Right now, we're asking them to go beyond our guidelines.
My concern is really that you move it up to 30%. I know I said I wasn't going to talk, but that's impossible. That we're going to move it to 30%, and then the people are going to go, well, we're at 38% now.
Yeah.
And can we now have that? I just feel like the more we up it,
Yeah.
the more you're going to have as your standard, not as your exception at 30% plus.
And I agree with your previous point too about if you don't use it on the front facade, then you've now added more on the other three sides.
You've increased your square footage allowance on the other three sides.
That's right.
Can you add, can they put all 30% of it on the front?
No.
Well, they could technically, but then the design review committee would probably say, we don't, this doesn't look good. This is not a good looking
Well,
building.
no, it
But
wouldn't.
technically they could. I like what Jeff mentioned earlier. Why not, instead of saying 30% total, each elevation no more than 30%. So each side for that one side cannot have more than 30%. The front can't have more than 30%.
You'd have to remove regarding EFS specifically,
Yeah, we're just talking about secondary materials.
so
Yeah.
you could still use other secondary materials. And
Right.
again, like I said, our very first statement under architectural character is all those facades that are visible should be high quality and finished in a manner consistent with the front facade. So we call for in the very first statement that all the sides should be quality, and you don't just do a really nice brick facade and do, block down the side. That's something that we've already got in there, and the design review committee can call for, so.
So EFS, when you were in the beginning of your presentation,
Mhm.
was said to be ornamental only, correct?
On the front facade.
Only on the front.
Okay. Does that still go against the 30%?
It would count against your 30%, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so nobody's made a motion, but I'm hearing from at least half the people that have talked so far that the 30% is some concern. So do we want to
Instead of
address?
trying to dictate a design of a building, I'm with you on the 30% per side and all that, but that's going to get real tricky when you're trying to design a building. I think my comfort level would be equal if we just said 20% on the secondary materials and then allow the DRC to be able to adjust from that if they felt like the design warranted being able to increase that.
That's what it sounds like I'm hearing from several of y'all. So does somebody want to make a motion to amend that? Wait, Mr. McKee?
Well, just a second. You know, if you, 20%, it's what you guys are fine with it, but stucco is the whole thing, you know. It's the reason we're even talking about this, I know. And stucco looks good. The whole thing is it's not kept clean, which someday it needs to be addressed that through code enforcement, it's got to be taken care of. I mean, it don't matter what you put on there, it's going to look bad if it's not taken care of.
Any material would be that way, yes, sir.
You know, so
Even hardy plank
you might as
was
well
bad.
get it in your mind that someday code enforcement is going to have to make sure that they're taken care of if you're going to allow things.
Yes, sir.
So, you know, you can do it. And, you know, I'm good with 10%, I'm good with 30%, it's whatever you guys think on that.
What does somebody, you have anything else you want to add?
I'm actually okay anywhere in between 10 and 30.
Okay.
It's up to you.
I really am.
So I've heard from 3 people say 20.
Yeah.
So does somebody
I'm
want to
gonna
make
make a motion to reduce the 30% secondary material to 20% of a total building secondary material, but still allowing, as we said earlier, that DRC would have their capability of flexibility.
Mr. McKee made the motion, Mr. Biggs on the second. Now we're talking about the amendment to reduce the 30% to 20% as secondary material only, not the other issues. It's the secondary, okay.
Now, the only question I got, what's your opinion, Angela? I mean, you know more about this than I do.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I had looked at it and I realized I think we should guide people to design what we want. So I felt like 10 was too small. We have 2 architects on the DRC. They both agreed and felt 30 was in design, and they're the ones that look at how the buildings are, you know, built and the materials and all those decisions, one of them being a professor who teaches other people how to do this as well. So I felt comfortable with the numbers that they provided to me and the reasoning that they provided from that standpoint. But like I said, we can step it up a little more gradually. We still do have that flexibility, but I do think it needs to be raised so that we're making sure we're getting what we want the first time and not having to coax it out of people once we see what they bring in. So.
Well, my only worry is, you know, you set it at 20, then you let somebody go to 25, then first thing you know, you're outside your guidelines. That's first thing you hear. So, you know, be prepared for that. We hear it now.
A lot of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've been outside our guidelines for 10 years. 'Cause, I mean, I'm not trying to be, but there's several buildings in town that have more than 10%.
And the DRC was allowed to use the flexibility portion of that. So design is one of those things that's more unique than structure and hard, fast things, because you don't want, because we had some situations here where we had to rethink some plans that came before us. I'll use the apartment complex. We probably almost restricted them too much by too much brick, because you ended up with some almost ended up with some very unusual looking small portions of hardy plank in areas where it would have almost been too small, you know, and so if we would have restricted them as much as we had initially wanted to. Anyways, DRC giving them some flexibility to still look at design and saying, yes, this makes sense. Our recommendation, our ordinance says this, but we also have flexibility. I'm fine with 20% because it'll keep people most likely less than 30% reality of the process.
And like you said, design is gray. It's not black and white. It's not like structural codes. There's a lot of aesthetics that go into design, and you want it to be pleasing to your eyes. So if you end up with 35% and it's pleasing to your eyes, then 35% is okay. But if it's at 10% and it's not pleasing to your eyes, you're going to try and, hey, can you add a little bit to it? So I think the 10 was probably too low. I think 30 would probably be okay, but if you guys are at 20, I'm fine with that, and give them the flexibility to move up.
That's why they also added the intent statement to make it clear what the purpose and what our goal was by allowing them to have those secondaries. So,
Any other discussion on the amendment of 20%? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes as amended, so we're back on the main motion as amended. Any other discussion or questions for Mrs. Reeder or Mr. Biggs, since he's chair of the committee, or not chair, on the committee?
I actually do appreciate the lighting and landscaping changes. Those are well needed. Like you said, a lot of times irrigation guys are going and dropping it at 6 inches, and that's all you're getting because you didn't tell them 18 inches. And next thing you know, everybody and their brothers cut it up, buried cable lines and everything else. So giving them some guidelines on lighting and irrigation is it's a great thing. Also on the garbage containers, changing that to where it give a little more flexibility. I think that's a great idea. So good job.
Thanks to you, to Mr. Biggs, Mr. Rez, the rest of the committee. I know these committees and our board are like herding cats a lot of times trying to get definitions down pat to be able to get something together. So thank y'all for doing this. I know y'all probably felt like it was taking a lot longer than it should, but it's hard to get everybody in on the same page and be able to get everything there. But thank y'all for doing this.
Mr. McKee?
Yeah, I do have one thing for consideration, and I've talked with Gerald about it on the legal part of it, and I've talked with Angela about it. And, when someone wants to change the color or the material used on a non-residential thing, they're supposed to bring something to do, for you guys to see that. My opinion, and I don't think there should be a cost on it, and I talked with Gerald on it, and he agreed with me. It gives him a little bit more bite if they have to have a permit. And I think you've looked into that. And only reason I'm saying that, a non-paying permit, it's just got to get a permit. Anybody that changes it anyway, without us knowing it like it's happened before, well, they're not going to come to us anyway for that. They're just going to change it. But it gives him more bite if it says they had to have a permit, because they didn't even come anyway. Do you agree with that?
That's correct.
So if they're going to have to come and get it, the only ones that's going to affect is the ones that don't come anyway. So I think for his part of it, trying to do the legal end, it needs that they have to have a permit. And that's an easy get when they come to bring you what they want.
Is that in the bylaws, or is that?
So the code currently talks about rehabbing and improving existing sites that are out there. So anything we approve here is supposed to be maintained that way for the life of it, unless they come back and ask us to change something. It does talk about them being encouraged to work with staff if they decide to make revisions, and major revisions needing design review approval. We could add some language specifically requiring a permit either approved by the DRC or their designee. That way minor things could be approved by staff here. So if it's just, I have a black awning in front of my door and I'd like to change it to a navy blue awning, that's not necessarily something we want to drag down in front of the DRC every time. So we could add that language into that section specifically, so that is gives us a little bit more teeth, as you say.
Again, is that something we need to get a motion on now, or is that something that you're going to do in the bylaws?
I don't have the text in front of me right now, but if you're comfortable with myself and the attorney coming up with that text regarding the permit, we can add a condition that it be added, I think.
That's to your bylaws?
It's to the actual amendment.
Come
Actually,
to
do I
the-
have to have that in front of us tonight, Gerald? No, it's in the code itself. The design guidelines itself.
Design guidelines. So in what you're amending tonight, it would just be another amendment to what you're amending.
We need to amend to allow staff and the attorney to come up with language.
I think you could just
Okay.
direct staff to add general conditions in the language.
All right, you want to make a motion on that?
Exactly, I'll make a motion for that.
Second.
Second, okay. So make sure we're clear on the motion. We are directing staff to, and our attorney to come up with language that would require a permit per se, or it has to come back before the town or designee, whatever the language is that we feel comfortable with. But this board is
Or a
moving
permit for
towards-
any changes to an existing structure, exterior material.
And I don't know if you want to add lighting on that or not. That's up to you guys, but I know material.
Well,
and
lighting's
color.
already covered now.
It's covered in that, right?
What if they make a change?
We can say exterior changes.
Okay.
Okay.
To
Okay.
an existing.
I was just listening to you guys on the lighting.
Okay. All right, so it's just basically exterior changes at staff's recommendation. So is everyone clear on that?
That's good.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, as the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're back on that item passes. We're back on the main motion as amended. Any other discussion? Good job, yeah, good job by everybody. Thank you. And just remember, this is always a fluid document. So, I mean, if there's something that we realize right away, if DRC comes back in 3 months and says we missed something, then this board or any board has a right to do that. So I appreciate the work. All right, all in favor of the motion as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes. On to Resolution 2019-46 to authorize Mike Wisman in his capacity as mayor to authorize the award of bid and enter into a contract with Grinder Tabor Grinder for project known as Forest Street Campus Phase 2. Mrs. Durant. You want to speak in the microphone?
Bids and the Daily News.
You want to speak in the microphone? Just.
Town of Arlington advertised for bids on July 2nd, 2019, the commercial appeal, and on June 30th, 2019, in the Daily News. Town of Arlington received sealed bids until Thursday, July 25th at 4 p.m., at which time bids were opened and publicly read aloud. The scope of work for this Phase 2 includes landscaping, lighting, additional parking in conjunction with construction of an amphitheater and farmers market / multi-use pavilion, with the contractor furnishing all labor, equipment, materials necessary and required for the safe, proper, and expeditious performance of work. A total of 5 bids were received, with the lowest and most qualified successful bidder being Grinder Tabor Grinder. A note there, Grinder Tabor Grinder is doing your Phase 1 improvements. Based on the base bid and the alternate one, for a total bid amount of $2,729,816.79. Staff has reviewed the bids, recommends award to Grinder Tabor Grinder should we choose to award.
You've heard the recommendation by Mrs. Durant. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion by Mr. McKee.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Pardue. Discussion.
I'm
Mr.
so
Biggs.
impatient, I know.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Biggs.
You'll understand one day.
You get there one day.
Yeah. Okay. I actually have a lot to say about this, so I wrote it down. I didn't want to miss any points, so I apologize, but I'm just going to read you guys what I put down on paper. Over the last 2 years, this board has spent or committed to spending $1.3 million for the tennis courts, $400,000 for the Playground of Dreams, $2.5 million for Forest Street Campus Phase 1, and $4 million on the second fire station. That's a total of $8.2 million on new assets in just the last 2 years. I voted in favor of these projects for various reasons at the time. Now we're being asked to approve an additional $2.7 million for an amphitheater and farmers market before we've even laid the first brick on the new fire station. We don't actually even know what the final cost will be on the fire station. We don't know what change orders will occur during that project. We are being asked to approve this additional $2.7 million without even knowing the annual cost to maintain the tennis courts, to maintain the new fire station, to maintain the new soccer complex, or the annual maintenance costs that are going to be associated with the amphitheater and farmers market. There was an MTAS study that was updated in 2014 that basically said Arlington needed a second fire company and a second fire station due to the geographic area our department currently covers. This was needed to reduce response times of our emergency personnel, especially when our current company was called to an emergency at some other part of the county. This was a safety issue for our residents. The fire station should have been the first project completed. However, we're only now beginning to break ground. I was very uncomfortable when we, as a board, initially approved for the town to have the ability to borrow $6 million on a loan for Forest Street campus. I share that discomfort with all of you at the time that we voted on it. However, I did move forward because I knew that we would still get to vote on borrowing on each phase of the project. I also asked the board to consider a debt policy that I wrote that would basically require the town to prioritize paying off the loans prior to adding additional capital projects several months ago. I did that because I knew this day was coming. It was evident when we did discuss the proposed policy in May that I did not have the support of the board for passing the policy or any form of the policy. So here we are. We have 6 music on the square events a year, or at least that's how many we're having this year. And so we're talking about 6 music on the square events and $2.7 million project. The last 2 music on the square events that I attended, they were not overflowing with people. It wasn't overly crowded. And I went there kind of to anticipate that we were, just busting out of the scenes, which was not the case. We currently have someone who sells farm produce at S.Y. Wilson's, and I've never seen this one vendor be overcome with customers. Other municipalities have farmers markets in sports complex parking lots or even in church parking lots. There are other options that don't burden the taxpayer. I believe that we should wait on building the amphitheater and farmers market for several reasons. One, we should not be borrowing money for these type of venues. These are clearly wants and not needs. It's not fair to future taxpayers that will have to pay for this project over the next 20 years. For these type of projects, we should wait until we have enough cash for the project, like we did with the tennis courts. Number 2 reason, the second fire station should be our current priority. This is a safety issue for all of our residents. We only have estimates and we don't really know what the final cost of the station will be. Once the second station is completed, then we can consider moving forward with another project. Number 3, we have several new assets in town: the soccer complex, the tennis courts, and the soon-to-be second fire station. We should wait until we know exactly what the annual maintenance costs of these assets are prior to starting another project that will eventually add more workload to our parks employees and add additional cost to our maintenance budget. 4, we just raised property taxes 22 cents a couple of months ago. So right after raising residents' taxes, now we're going to spend $2.7 million on this project. The tax increase only took into consideration the additional cost of the second fire company and did not consider the added maintenance cost of all these new assets. We basically told the residents that we don't have enough money, so we need to raise your taxes. Now, just a few months later, we're going to spend money on this project, which I think can clearly wait. The 5th reason, we are currently waiting on a study from the pavement management group that we approved earlier today concerning the current condition of our roads. This study will give us a firm representation of our current road and conditions and will help us prioritize repaving, repairing, etc. Even before we get the results of this from the consultant, it appears to me that many of our neighborhood roads are in great need of attention. Maintenance of our roads should be a priority over this project, and we need to wait for the results of that study to see to make sure that we're putting enough money back annually for maintaining our roads. Would I love a farmer's market and a amphitheater? Of course I would. But these things should be prioritized, and we should save money for these types of projects instead of borrowing money which will cost the taxpayers for 20 years. and I'll end my little speech with a quote from President Eisenhower. As quickly as you start spending government money in large amounts, it looks like free money. However, it's not free. The taxpayers have to pay for it. So I just can't vote in favor of this project at this time. And those are the reasons.
Okay. I'll discuss a few things because it sounded, I mean, you went way back 8 years basically, and so I'll address a few things. Saying that, going back to the 2014 fire study, there was a fire study before that, a few years. Fire has been discussed for years. We added, 3 additional personnel, three or 4 years ago, I can't remember, to expanded the building to get ready for a second company. We weren't sure about a second station, but we've been working towards that. As you're saying, we need to wait and pay, in my opinion. If we wait on to do one thing at a time, nothing will ever get done. We have, you mentioned that the fire needs to be priority, but it is. It's getting built, it's getting done. And you said roads needs to be a priority. So, I mean, again, that's multiple things that have to go on at once. Sewer has to be a priority. Everything has to have a focus on it, in my opinion. When we agreed on this 2 years ago to move forward, we had what? 1, 2, 3, 4, roughly around 5 buildings that were all being projected or proposed for Depot Square. Roughly $15, $16, $17 million worth of real estate from private investors. And one of the things that we discussed as a board and we discussed with those owners is investing in ourselves, investing in our community to make Depot Square, which we've heard about forever. We have to embrace it. People have been worried about the future of it. And one of the things that I think the vision of this board had was to make something where people can play, eat, shop, walk, and have a community feel. We also said at that time, at least in our opinion, depending on how this budgets came back, that if we could do it and do it within the budget or what we said, then we should do it and complete a project for once. I spoke with someone today, and they point out the baseball fields. I mean, those who have been around longer than me know how the sports complex has been pieced together over the years because of whether it was land that was donated, whether it was lack of money, it was the community was smaller. I mean, if you look at the parking lot, if you look at the way the fields, there's no restrooms on one side and there's restrooms on the other. So it was one of those things it's a good complex, but it's been piecemealed together, and we've even had to do some of that over the last 7-8 years. So I think when we talk about setting a vision for the town and stuff, we're talking about when we do something, we try to do it right. Yes, we talk about taxpayers. Well, I'm a taxpayer, you're a taxpayer. We're all taxpayers. I don't want to pay any more in taxes than anybody else. But we also have to remember on this fire station, again, we're talking, yes, there is a note on this, and people are making an issue of it, and that's fine. But there is a note on this that was if we were not doing fire this year, we would not have a tax increase. If we would have done fire last year, we would have had a tax increase. We would have done fire in 2014, we would have had a tax increase. There's no way to add 12 personnel and $1 million roughly to the budget without having a tax increase. We're not Collierville, Germantown, or everywhere else where they have a lot of commercial. Even Millington. I mean, Millington relies solely on commercial. We rely on residential. So, in my opinion, is we have to complete a project that we started. I went and knocked on almost every door around there, and every one of them said, we don't want to look at a pile of dirt. We don't want to look at an empty field. Y'all started it, y'all finish it. And that's from the residents that live right there. So I guess when we talk about time frame, how priorities is fire stations or road improvements and stuff, let me look at Mrs. Durant. So this project, if we're to grant this award, what are we looking at as the build out on this project time-wise? I know we've done a lot of the prep work already. Roughly how much money?
At least 18 months for a full build out, unless Mr. Hill has a different estimation in time.
I think that's probably a good estimate, 18 months.
So when we talk about planning and we talk about, before the first brick, the fire station will be built before this is completed.
Bids for the fire station on the 29th of August, it'll be on your September
Yeah.
agenda.
So again, it's multiple things that whether it's public safety, it's roads, it's all that we're trying to do. We're trying to create the environment in the community, in my opinion, to make this a desirable place, and then we have to look at everything. And so again, if we wait for, in my opinion, one project to be complete before the next one gets complete, for the next one gets complete, we'll be waiting a very long time for a lot of projects.
But I'll just say, we're not doing one project at a time. And I didn't say that we should do one project at a time. We're doing tennis courts right now. We just got finished with the first, or actually they're starting the process of the first phase of campus. I'm just saying that we've got a lot going on right now. And we don't know what the annual maintenance cost of all this stuff is going to be. And so to add another large asset without having a firm grip on that part of it, to me, is also an issue. I don't want to be in a situation where in 2 years from now, we're like, wow, you know what, we had to add this many park people, and then all of a sudden, we may be in a position where we're having to ask for another tax increase. So I just think it's wiser to slow down, and like I said, one of my biggest heartburns about the whole thing is that we're actually borrowing money to do something that is not a want, that is not a need, is a want, and to think that, in my mind, that 20 years from now, they're still going to be having that $400,000 payment, I think puts a burden on future boards that if we just waited, we might not have to do.
Other comments? Mr. Harmon?
Thank you.
In many respects, I agree with Jeremy on so much of this. But what I'm looking at is sometimes, whether you like or want to do a particular thing or not, it's basically what you end up having to do because we've had priorities. The second station was a priority of mine for years because of the safety aspect. I understood this. I knew the cost. And I was hoping that someday we would get to this point. Depot Square. That is, and I'll say it again, it is the heart of our town.
Hey, you're exactly right.
So, I'm not crazy about spending this kind of money, but I tell you, when a few things were changed, the BE was changed. You look at downtown right now, we don't have the retail there. What are we going to do? We're approved, well, it has been approved commercial in other areas. If we don't do something, and it gives me heartburn too, but if we don't do something for the Depot Square area, we're going to lose the heart of the town.
You're exactly right.
So I'm trying, and it gives me heartburn. There's no doubt about it. But there's just things that we just have to knuckle down and we don't have a choice. And I think that right now, that's the position that I'm in. I don't see that I have any other choice because I don't want anything else that's going to jeopardize Depot Square. We're going to have to do something. And I would like to see us look at another type of BE zoning for that so that we get retail down there. I know that might create heartburn for some of the developers or what have you. I don't care. We've got to do something for the square. And I think this right here, by finishing out this project now, I'm afraid if we wait, the other developments, when it comes in, I don't want to be a day late and a dollar short on this, because if we wait too long, we may lose this opportunity to save the square. So
Good point.
That's,
I'm gonna be impatient, all right?
Oh, Harry's going to speak right now.
Now, let me tell you, first of all, we don't need to make this political, and that's what we've been doing. This is, the BE, which if you want a little bit of history, the BE was started for a political reason. And if you want to know why, you can come talk to me personally and I'll let you know. It was stopped and I voted against it, but let me tell you, we only had 2 times, we only got 2 businesses that sell beer that would not have been allowed to, and that's the Olympic and that's Pericos. So I'm not going to say I was wrong. All I said was I think we needed to wait a little longer. Well, heck, we waited longer because it never happened. So maybe I was a little bit wrong there. I'm going to be for this project, and I'm going to tell you why, because I'm going to take politics out of it completely. I got the floor right now. You can do it at the end. I'm going to take it completely out of it. I can talk about it now because my family does not own a business down there. Before, I wouldn't say what I'm saying now. If we don't do something, Larry, you're exactly right. And I've got some ideas that I want to bring later on, and some of it's got to do with hotel tax and incentives for people to open up, but now's not the time to do that. If we want to, and I listened to Deborah talk about it, and she's exactly right. We have to plan for it. And it really kind of bothers me that the person that is really against it is not here to speak against it. And he's a personal friend of mine. And all I'm saying, that's political. We need to drop this political stuff. And if we're not gonna support Depot Square, we hear out of one side of our mouth that we want that small town feel. The only place you're gonna have that is in Depot Square. I'm just telling you, you say that's what you want, but then you turn around and you say you don't want it. That's one of the main reasons we closed our business, because there's no foot traffic down there. I'm sorry. And I appreciate George for standing up to not let anybody rent that spot unless they did retail. And we got to do something, and we got to wake up and go on and if, like I say, I'm not teaming with Mike, I'm not teaming with nobody or against anybody, but you better do something. I think not only that, we need to be looking at something else going down there and plan for it, like Cheryl said before on a library. We got to start planning for things like that. We do, but if you're not going to complete this, you're just telling them you don't care anything about Depot Square as far as I'm concerned. Now, maybe you're wrong, maybe I'm wrong, but that's just what you're telling me.
well,
I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it at that.
I'd like to respond. I respect your opinion, but to say that me voting my conscience is being political, I disagree.
I wasn't talking about you. I'm talking about others.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm voting my conscience. That's what I'm doing tonight. I'm not trying to make this a political football. Honestly, I don't think it's a winning position if you're sitting in my seat. But this is how I truly feel. So I'm voting my conscience.
I understand it, and I think you should do that. But I'm just, we say we want a small town feel, but then we walk out of there and we say, no, we don't want it.
I'll say I didn't.
That's a historical area. And I put it like this. The bids come back 800,000 less than what I thought it was going to be. Okay. And my question is, I hear that I'm just not for it right now. But you're going to save 800,000, if not more, if you go on and do it now. And we already going to pay this note, no matter whether it is or whether it's not. We didn't have to borrow this. And my good friend Gene Hinder sat down with me for hours over this and explained why we should do it this way with the low interest that we're going to be doing it at. It just makes sense. And I hate to say that, but it is, huh?
And you're able to maintain your bond rating.
Absolutely. And, the rating we got is unheard of. And, and I know that I'm going to get blasted for this, but it don't bother me.
No, I'm going to get blasted for it. Trust me.
And Larry's going to get blasted for it.
Well, I'm going to get blasted either way. But, I live I can see Depot Square from my front porch. And I have watched over at first I had, when I saw everything happening as far as all the design and what the BE could do and all the designs that were coming up and that we had the community involvement. And now 11 years later, what I'm seeing now, if I don't see how we can wait any longer.
Well,
Because
you know.
I walk down there and unless you have specific need for one or two different type of companies.
You don't come.
You don't go to the square.
Well, we may be wrong by doing this, but I'd rather be wrong by doing it than turn around and saying, I wished we had have done this to help keep the charm. Go look in Bartlett of theirs. Go look at some of the others. I'm just telling you, you can do it. And I had to, I went to Houston, Texas last week for more than one reason. One of them was to go and visit with Kevin and let him show me the same thing we're looking at right here. And it was unbelievable. The it's brand new, but it's amazing what it looks like. And I understand down at College Hill, it has an amphitheater down there, but let me tell you, it's not safe to be down there. I'm sorry to say that, it's not.
And to be transparent, since you're on that subject, that is slated to be torn down this fall.
Yeah, it's not a good situation, and it's not going to be used the way that it needs to be. And I look back, Thomas Payne right there, he and myself and two others started music on the square. And I think we can build it back. At one time it was huge, but I think we can build it back. It's going to take some things. And goodness, and I know it's money, but if we're saving $800,000, but if you piecemeal this and take part of it away, and you got an opportunity to do it all at one time and do it right. We're saying wait till later, well, you're going to spend more than $800,000 that you're saving on it. But I'm going to be for it because I'm for trying everything I can to get that area back built up. I can say that now that I don't own a business down there and have a clear conscience. But if we don't do something, and it's going to have to be retail, we got to push for retail. We tell everybody retail, retail, retail. When people come to shop, they can't shop for 30 minutes. So they're not going to come. So, I've said all I'm going to say on it. So, and that was 10 minutes longer than I planned.
Okay. Mr.
Go
Brooks?
ahead. I'll be last this time.
You're the old Arlington guy.
I'm
You're
the old
oldest,
guy.
Okay.
So, I mean, I agree with both of you, right? And I agree with Larry.
Walk out of here friends no matter what.
And nobody wants to spend money. Oh, I hope we don't want to spend money frivolously. But I can tell you that the construction that we've had so far, which is essentially one building at this point in time, plus Brenda Lay rebuilding, the one that's built has two more phases, and they're watching to see what we do, because they would like to go ahead and start on a second building, but the developers are going to be a little bit hesitant on us moving forward if we don't move forward, just because they're going to feel that we're not as committed as we have said we are. And we put the plan together. I think it's a fantastic plan. I think it's beautiful. I think the townspeople, has it been 11 years? Or how long ago did we do the community?
2012, or was it 13?
Okay, so 6 years ago? Okay, I didn't think it felt like 11. I don't know where I had.
That's when I got down there.
Oh,
and
okay, I'm
watched the
sorry. Okay,
beginnings.
yeah.
Yeah.
And, I'm going to be for the project. I'm excited about the project. I hope I'm completely right about the project, And, I'm not going to get into the minor details of we could spend more later or spend less now or spend whatever. I think it's good for our town. I think it's good for Depot Square. I think it's the right thing to do. And so I don't want to see the progress that has started in Depot Square come to a halt again. And so I think this shows the town and everybody else that's spending money down there that we're truly committed to it.
Good. Ms. Pardue?
I want to talk function. So when we first approved the loan up to $6 million, the point was we needed the extra parking. I'm fully on board that we needed that extra parking, especially after seeing, you know, the soccer tournament we had, and these guys are parking all up and down Griffin and Forest and all of that. So it was important that we finished out the parking, which is what we did in phase one. Phase two addresses the need that is arisen, whatever, from development that we have in Depot Square. So the Winstead property has greatly reduced our footprint available for functions like Arlington and April. So we needed a place to be able to move Arlington and April, which is where the 4th Street campus comes into play. And so, you know, for me, looking at this project, it was, what are we going to be able to do on this campus so that we can move Arlington and April over there, Christmas on the Square over there, and that sort of function then comes into play with phase two. So then it's a matter of, well, what can we do in phase two to address that need with those events that do keep that small town charm that we're all talking about? And again, addresses the 2013 Depot Square Master Plan. So unfortunately, with the bid that we had, it didn't quite separate it out as in, you know, this is just the drainage and grading and curbing and all that, just to allow for that. But just by using the line item budget that they provided, it looks like the buildings, just the amphitheater, restroom, and farmer's market is about 1.57 million of the proposed amount. Parking lot, drainage, grading, curbing, walking path into Depot Square is the balance of it, which by my estimation is about 1.16 million. Now, granted, our bid is not divided that way, so we can't approve it based on that. But to me, it helps to put into play, you know, what exactly are we looking at? Ms. Wiseman had a very good question. Actually, the question of, well, who's going to manage the farmer's market and who's going to manage the functions of the amphitheater? Is the town going to take that over? Are we going to ask a private or nonprofit to take that over? I think a lot of those questions come into play on, you know, what exactly are we going to do with the buildings? Operational expenses long-term obviously will come into play as well. So for me, when the loan first came to us, it was all about making sure we completed the parking lot. And when it was sold to us, it was, we don't have to finish this whole project immediately. These things take time. And so, again, that was the conversation. And so in approaching it, now that I'm looking at what we have the balance of, I do see a need for us to address the Depot Square Master Plan. It was something that the town pretty much all got together. There was a survey of all the residents, all the businesses, everybody got together and said, this is what we want long-term for the Depot Square area. Removing the BE does affect it some. Projects that we've approved will affect the functionality in Depot Square some. And so for me, this project becomes more about maintaining what we wanted long-term with the Depot Square Master Plan. Do I think we need an amphitheater and a farmer's market right now? I don't. That's not really the bid that we have in front of us. But I do believe that we need to get this land ready and available for festivals that we would have in Depot Square that we're not going to be able to put there anymore because of lack of space. So I'm a little conflicted on this particular project, to be honest with you. I do want a finished product. I do want us to have walkability from this campus to Depot Square. I think that's important. I do think we need the extra parking that this second phase allows for. I do think we need the drainage and grading and all of the land, and that's expensive stuff, you know, so all of that adds up. And so when I pluck out the buildings, which I can't, but just for me it helps, that the buildings alone, just building them, not maintaining them long-term, at 1.5 million, 1.6 million, to me puts the proposal in a different arena. I do think and agree with Jeremy that we need to set the precedent that moving forward we put those needs first and we stop allowing some of these other items to take precedence. In this campus, you'll see that there's a future library there. Obviously, a library is needed more than the amphitheater and the farmer's market at this point. Town hall is also needed, and there's another out parcel that could potentially, you know, allow for that. Will they go there? That's to be determined. You know, when I look at the building cost, we can't build a library for 1.5 million. So even if I pluck the buildings out for the amphitheater and the farmer's market, not that I can, but if I could, it still wouldn't cover the cost of the library to go there, which in my opinion is a much more pressing issue. Again, I'm a bit conflicted on this project, but I do think that based on the needs that we have in Depot Square, based on what we got started, and with the intention that as we have this development that has been approved in our town, our revenues will increase. There's no prepayment penalty on this particular loan, so there's always the possibility that this could be paid off earlier, which is what I would hope that we would do. So I am going to go ahead and move forward with this project solely on the premise that we need to have a place for the festivals in town, and so that we are not putting our residents in harm's way by keeping them in a more congested area.
I got it. Mr.
So,
Brooks?
being as the oldest or longest sitting board member up here, I could carry y'all way back to the BE, and I could tell you reasons why it was done, and I can tell you reasons why people done what they did. And yes, it was political. Yes, it was personal gain. It was all played into the mix. I can promise you that. The first vote to do away with the BE district was Mike's first board meeting. So we had kind of, few of us had got together and we were wanting to try and move things around town, shuffle it around, get it a little more spread out to draw businesses into town. Well, lo and behold, one person said yes, everybody else said no. Mike stood beside me and said yes, even though he didn't have to. Didn't happen that night, and I still pushed. I still thought the B&E was not the right answer to where it was at. I thought it was just not the right answer for Depot Square. And honestly, I still don't think that particular setup of the B&E was right for Depot Square, because you were asking us to push everything that a lot of people don't even want in town into their most precious part of town. So I don't think that was ever the right answer, not the BE district. I think there's been a large commitment of development going on down there on the Depot Square over the past 4 to 5 years, and they've been banking on us doing exactly what we said we were going to do and finish this project. So we touched on the ball fields, the baseball fields. I'll go back to that one. It was a little bit before my time, but I was part of the baseball organization back then. It could have been a whole lot different, but it was piecemeal together. The ball fields are set in the wrong direction. You could have paid attention to the sun. They should have been turned 45 degrees. There's a whole lot of things that could have been done different, but we were doing what we could do at the time with the funds that we had and the donations that we were getting and the land and whatnot. Parking lot and the football fields over there was Ellendale Riding Club. I don't know if any of you remember that, but it was a riding arena. So it's done pretty good piecing it together. But has it cost us a lot more money piecing it together? Absolutely. We've drawn a lot of attention on Depot Square based on what we've done to try and spur growth, and I think this is a large part of spurring that growth. I'm not going to piecemeal this project. I've set up here and piecemealed some projects together, but I'm not going to piecemeal this one. Now, I'm probably going to get rocks thrown at me, and that's okay. I got broad shoulders and a strong back. I'm okay with that. I'm not going to piecemeal it. And that being said, I'm all for it. Let's get it done.
I'll just wrap it up real fast. A couple of things. I'm glad the Depot Square Master Plan was recognized, because that was a large community input, large community event. Businesses, I know there's a business down there right now that's almost completed that keeps saying, please tell me you're going to do what you say you're going to do. That's a lot of people put a lot of time and effort into it, and here we are again, as we are with the fire station years later, as we are with this plan. You know, things take a lot of time, and that's why when we talk, and I agree with Ms. Wiseman when she says we need to plan. We have 18 months roughly to start planning how we're going to handle some of these events. But it is more than music on the square of 6 times a year. I mean, you got churches that want to use it. You can have movies in the park, plays, other types of concerts, summer camps. I mean, it's one of those things that can be utilized as much as you allow. I mean, we utilize the safe room for things that we never thought we would use it for. The barbecue competition could end up over there at some point. I'm not saying it will, but I'm just saying we tear up a Douglas Park every year. We know, and I know if our parks, and I know Terry knows, we tear that field up every year, and it spend money every year fixing it. And one of these times we're gonna, I mean, I'm just looking at that park, and I don't know the measurements, but that may end up being something that's good there. I don't know, but it gives us options. Same fireworks show, and you see the parking at the sports complex. We don't know what sport. Yeah, it could be. I'm just saying there's. The opportunities are endless. I'm not saying that's why we're building it, but I'm saying it's more than just a few, 4 or 5 months of a few musics on the square, and that's nobody's building it for that. It is because we had a community come together with the Depot Square Master Plan. We've had businesses invest in us. We said we were going to invest in it, and I'm excited to see a completed project for what we've all talked about even before I moved out here. About what Depot Square meant to this town, and I'm glad Harry said something about Bartlett, because I grew up in Bartlett, and Bartlett has never been able to get back their little train station area right there. I mean, so it's, and they wish they could. I know people that have gone in and renovated those buildings, and they still couldn't get it back. So, but that's all I have. But if there's no more comments,
This may not bring it back to life down there, but it's a shot. It's a shot.
yeah.
It's going to take this and more for us, more things put in place to really help the Depot Square. So our works, just this right here is not, it's going to take a lot more. So we got a lot more ahead of us. So.
But
It's just,
you can do incentives down there to send people down there. It's just something this board needs to talk about at another date, I think.
Yes.
There's tax money off of hotels, there's incentives to put in for retail, give them, there's different things you can do. But if we don't think it's important, then don't do it. But if you do think it's important, let's discuss it down the road.
and many of the communities that people either mention or compare us or want us to be have done those same type things. I mean, they've done incentives for historical areas and stuff. So
A lot of reluctant to ever bring that up because we had a business down there. Because now if there's not, we better try to attract some businesses down there.
okay.
Mayor, may I suggest a
Yes,
roll
ma'am.
call vote?
Okay.
Can I
Yes.
Can we discuss the option of the alternate bid number 1? So just the farmer's market, we have that bid of $636,000 plus. Speaking with Mr. Hill earlier, if we chose not to do the farmer's market now, it doesn't, it's not like we have to break up anything later. It's simply a matter of putting the building in place when we need it. If we didn't do the farmer's market now, it would just be a grassy area, right, Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Yes. So with that in mind, farmer's market, I know that's the big popular thing, but we had a farmer's market in Depot Square and it didn't work out very well. And I know S.Y. Wilson's, they've got the table out that they do. I'm not even sure how often they do it. But can we talk about whether that's something that we think is a viable long-term option? Is it just going to be a farmer's market? Are we going to talk about it being other availability, functionally?
Most of them are other functions, and if you go to Jackson, I think, I was up there just a few weeks ago, they had a huge function on theirs.
The one that's actually in Bolivar that they've redone actually has an outdoor church service on Sunday mornings that utilizes it.
There's a lot of functions that they're using them for, because I don't like to use names, but I actually went up to listen to Bill Lee speak at the one in Jackson, and I talked to some of the people up there, and they use them for multiple things. My opinion is, if we're gonna do it, let's try to build it all and get it done, and see if we can get functions, bring it out. When you bring people to an area, that's when you start bringing back that area. And people will come. Now, they're not gonna come, and I was here when we did and I was with Maurice Gaines, and we discussed it many times about the little farmer's market that went in down there. And it's very difficult to put in a farmer's market like he was trying to do there, because number one thing, he needed to be able to rent space no matter what it was. And, when you start mixing it with something else that day, it finally just goes away. I mean, when you let just one company do it all, then it became not really a farmer's market. And that's what happened. And I think the opportunity is there if we just, it's gonna put work on staff more, and it's gonna put work on open volunteers. And I don't know how we'll do it now, but we got 18 months to come up with a way to do it, or I say we got a year. We need to have it in place. How you gonna do it long before that? But I'm gonna be for the whole project and get it done and see if we can push people down there. I'd love to have a playground there so the kids had to go there, and then you'd get the mamas there and the daddies there. But, that's for another topic down the road.
Are we going to be looking for this farmer's market to be a revenue producer, or?
I personally don't want it that way, but that's just mine. But I may not even be on the board by the time they get through with that. Of course, that can be discussed by the board, but I don't think that was in
That was not the intent.
that was not the intent when we went through all the meetings with citizens.
Maybe
and
we
all.
never should have called it a farmer's market building. It's a multi-use building.
That's right.
We could call it a splash pad. I mean, I know there's several people that like to see it to be a splash pad.
I got a pool in my backyard. I don't need a splash pad.
But no, I don't think it was ever discussed that it would be a revenue producer. It's more of a multi-use building that would bring people together. I mean, ultimately, I'm like you, the library and town hall down there would anchor the site, bring more people there. And we saw it as connectivity between the soccer fields, the community garden, the library, the amphitheater, the farmer's market, all playing against each other for outdoor classroom space, outdoor entertainment space, all of them cooperating with one another and interconnected to one another for all of those uses that you may need any of that space for. Soccer has first priority of the overhang at the pavilion that was just done with ribbon cutting. So you see how large the soccer program is. When that's not being used by soccer, yes, you can have other people utilize that facility as well on the outside, not the inside. Sports programs get a little proprietary about what's on the inside of those buildings, because they'll have their own assets in there, their own storage, their own money invested on what's going on the inside of that building. So there's still a need for a multi-purpose building, but I don't think a revenue producer was ever the vision.
I understand the concern about that of $600,000 is a lot of money to put toward that. And if there was something that we were going to scrap off of it, I'd say this is probably in the target, right? But I'm also thinking that if we desired to do it 5 years down the road, 3 years down the road, we're back in a situation where we're roping off a place, and for 3 or 4 months, the thing's not usable in the parking lot because you got construction equipment there, you potentially tearing up facility, tearing up asphalt, et cetera, that you may have to repair. I mean, it may end up costing us more down the road, or to me, the worst case scenario for the whole project is you actually don't complete it and you never put one there and you never find out if you can actually get a functioning farmer's market or other uses there, right? And so we're going to be tearing everything up anyways and doing it. I think it'll cost us more to do it at a later date, to bring in a crew, bring in a site to do the construction. It's actually going to get more costly that way. So, I mean, if we're committed to having this pavilion, this facility there as a multi-use / farmer's market, I mean, if we're committed as a board doing it, in my opinion, is going ahead and doing it because it'll cost you more on the back end to do it at a later date. But I absolutely understand where you're coming from on that.
I'd rather be shot at one time and I had twice.
Any other discussion?
I don't want to be shot at all, by the way.
Or were you wanting, any other discussion? Roll call vote, Ms. Durant.
Harmon.
Yes.
Pardue. Yes. Jeff McKee.
Yes.
Oscar Brooks.
Yes.
Harry McKee.
Yes.
Alderman Biggs.
No.
Mayor Wisner.
Yes.
6 yes, 1 no.
That item passes. All right, on to item E, Resolution 2019-47. Mr. Baker, if you want to leave, I know you were here just in case. I know it's been a long night. Resolution 2019-47 to authorize Mike Wisman in his capacity as mayor to enter into an agreement with Powers Hill Design, LLC, for professional services for planning consulting services. Mrs. Durant.
The town of Arlington published a job description for a full-time town planner, May 12, 2019. Opened that up to receive resumes and applications. Published again in June of 2019. 2 applications were received. We do not feel like those 2 applications are a good representation of the talent that is available in the realm of planning. Therefore, we published a request for proposals for consultant planning services. It was published in the Commercial Appeal on July 5th, 2019, and the Daily News on July 4th, 2019. We received sealed proposals until Friday, July 26th at 1 p.m., at which time 4 proposals were received and reviewed by a committee and scored independent of one another, with Powers Hill Design, LLC, being the overall composite high score of 92.4 by the committee. I can tell you that both Mr. Hill and I both have worked with contractual planning in the past. While it is not ideal, it can work. It can be productive. It does put a little bit more of the day-to-day responsibilities on the in-house staff. However, like Mayor Wisman was saying earlier, we have grown our staff over the last few years. So we do have staff available that will be able to help with those day-to-day questions. You have the proposal in front of you. I apologize for it not being in the board book. It was an oversight, but you do have that proposal before you. Ms. Nisha Powers with Powers Hill is here to answer any questions you may have.
You've heard the recommendation by Mrs. Durant. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Brooks. Second from Mr. McKee. Discussion and questions. Any discussion?
How long a contract are we talking about?
It's open-ended. It's been my experience that you're going to need to see a downturn in the economy and a shift in the amount of development that is going on to free up the talent. Everybody that I've called in a 4-state radius around us that's worked their salt in planning is happy where they are. They're busy where they are. They're happy where they are. They have life circumstances that are preventing them from making a career change. It's when you have a downturn in the economy and there's not as much development going on that you start to see engineers, architects, developers, people that are in the business be freed up to make those decisions, to make those changes. Right now, they're pretty grounded where they are.
So just so everybody knows, after we took resumes and applications, I actually tried to reach out to a couple that were from neighboring communities or in the region. Went to breakfast, saw one at church just recently, and they're all respected planners, and every one of them said, it's probably just 6 months too late. I just started this job 6 months ago. I just started this job 8 months ago. I feel like I gave my word. They said, I would love to come work for y'all, but I feel like I'd be going back on my word. So,
We had it out there nationwide.
yeah. So this, like when we kind of had to say contractual, we said this isn't the most ideal situation, but seeing this proposal under the circumstances, whether it's a 1 month, 2 month, 6 month, I don't know. You know, if the right person comes along, that changes everything. We'll continue to keep our eyes and ears open, but it's the most ideal situation of the ones that we have, I feel, because we don't have to, when you go contractual, and you look at the different companies, they're all well respected, but sometimes there are groups of people that you'll be dealing with. When I say that, I think some of them have 9 or 10, whereas we would be dealing with Mrs. Reeder and Mr. Powers and Ms. Hill, the ones that we know that we're dealing with constantly already. And so it's the most ideal situation of the situation we're in. So I'm happy for this proposal at this time.
Either party has a 30-day notification for terminating the relationship.
And we have,
Oh, well, I don't know if you meant like, okay, well, you want to have a question, you can ask Ms. Durant if she can.
Talk afterwards.
Okay. Ms.
and we
McKee.
have a replacement for the one that just left.
Yes, sir.
And then that will be doing quite a bit of the legwork in the office, correct?
Once she is properly
Communicating with the,
Yes, sir. Most communication would have to go through me, because there'll be a lot of things that we should be able to do in-house before it goes to Mr.
Other
A
questions?
lot
or
of the day-to-day
oh.
questions, building permits, setbacks, things that are basically an interruption to her concentration on workflow today. It's real easy to use someone as a crutch if they're sitting right there and they have the answers off the top of their head.
Other discussion, questions?
Nah, the front page answers all I need to know. Works for me.
and you said it's open-ended, but do we got to give say if somebody walks in tomorrow and wants the job, and you like them and you hire them, how much time do we got to?
30 days.
30 days.
30 days? Okay. I didn't read it, so.
Yeah. Other discussion or questions? Seeing none. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That item passes. Item F, Resolution 2019-48 to remove uncollectible taxes from the Town of Arlington certified rolls. Mrs. Durant. I was about to read Mrs. Owens, but
We're hoping Ms. Owens is in labor. 7 companies comprise this request through the Shelby County Trustee's Office. They are recommending that we write off $11,998.36 worth of uncollectible business bid tax from businesses as they have folded and are not reachable through the trustee's office. The majority of that seems to be Allen Steel Company. We bought that facility, we bought that building. We know that there were a lot of financial concerns there, and you won't ever see that money. So, as recommended by the Shelby County Trustee, staff reports the request for the uncollectible taxes to be removed from the certified tax rolls at this time.
you've heard the recommendation by Mrs. Durant. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Brooks.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Pardue. Discussion or questions?
We need to kill 6 minutes, so we can go at least 10.
No, we don't. No, we don't. So just no discussion. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item passes. Do I have a motion to approve the bills for payment? We got a motion by Mr. McKee, second by Mr. Brooks. Any objection? No objection. We are paying the bills. Any other announcements, Ms. Durant, before we leave?
No, sir.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion and a second. No objection. This meeting's adjourned.
No.
Oh, okay. He's a good friend of mine for years. But he wasn't here tonight.
Let me tell you what, it was started.
Really?
Yeah, I'll tell you about it someday.
Yeah. Yeah, but you mean, so you're happy that I printed it out? Yeah. All right.
And I don't want to copy of what I said.
Let me see where I put it. All right. It's not personal, and I just told him, I said, this has nothing to do with the election. You know, this is a